Project Resurrection and everything else that I create in media, at least, can be found at projectresurrection.blog. You should go check that out. And while you're checking that out, you should go to Everbook Forever. That's EVER book, everbookforever.com, and look at the new project that Pastor Brian Wolfmueller and I have going to try to help you get a better grip on the information, time, movements, and everything in life with just a couple pieces of paper and maybe a scrap of leather. You should check it out, everbook.com. Finally, before we get going today, this is a fairly special episode of Project Resurrection Raw, in that the tables are turned, and I'm being interviewed by, someone very near and dear to me, my own wife, Meridith. This was her idea, and she'll explain that as she starts off the interview. There's something that she really wanted to get out of me, and it's both the narrow specifics of the thing, but it's also a bigger picture idea, dealing with the question of how do we discern as we watch as Americans, not just what we watch the world, but what we watch when we are entertained. It also then, I wasn't expecting this, but this is the longest episode I've ever released. We're looking at a 3-hour episode, so feel free to just take it in chunks, that you do not have to just sit down and listen to this thing all at once. But I would encourage you to work your way through it, because we're going to traverse a grand set of topics. And we're going to start off with Star Wars, because that's the thing she wants to know about. And if it feels a bit geeky to you, that's kind of her point too. It's not her thing, but she's trying to understand it. But we're going to end up talking about everything from Donald Trump to Bear Grylls, from Killmonger to getting things done. If you know who Spawn is, we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about Tesla Motors. Those are not all deeply, but this conversation goes everywhere. And I do think, I do hope you enjoy it.
All right, so I spend time in my kitchen quite often, washing dishes, cleaning up after meals, prepping meals, and that's kind of my thinking space. And recently, I have been listening to audiobooks quite a bit, and the thought has come to mind that some of the things that I'm listening to, I really enjoy. Some of the things that authors write, I disagree with, and it would be nice to have somebody who could guide me through these questions that I have, the wrestling of my Christian worldview with what I am encountering in pop culture or popular things that our culture is shoving in front of me every day. A lot of times that comes in the form of media and movies, books, billboards, what have you. So I was thinking back, and Jonathan Fisk, Reverend Jonathan Fisk, is a man who used to be interviewed on Issues, Etc. many years ago he still is interviewed on Issues, Etc., but he did movie reviews regularly, and I enjoyed his way of taking what he was engaged in the movie and how he spun it with a Christian vantage point. He's able to make pop culture accessible to conservative thinkers. And instead of saying that pop culture is bad or stay away from it, he takes time to examine it through a Christ-centered worldview, exposing it for what it is. And I thought, I miss that. I'd like that to happen more. And so today we are going to have an interview with Reverend Jonathan Fisk, and he is going to talk to us about something that honestly, I'm a little bit nervous about this topic, because you have, in its fandom, you have those who are extremely serious And you also have people in the world who don't like it at all. And what is that it? He's going to talk to us about Star Wars. With the new release coming, let's see, when is this? December 20th, 2019. It is said that they are going to have the final Star Wars film released. It's Star Wars, let me see if I have this written down. Star Wars Episode 9 is the only title that I could hear or find in my research. So I would like to hear of his journey in and possibly out of Star Wars fandom. I'd like to hear about what he's excited about with this new release. I'd like to hear about what he's been disappointed about with regards to Star Wars and that touchy issue in the church. Is Star Wars of the dark side? Or can we use it, see through it with the light of Christ? Is Christ or a Christ figure in Star Wars? So, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
You monologue well.
Oh, do I? Oh, boy. So, let's start off. And I was trying to do some research about the different titles. Okay, let the listener be warned. I am not a geek Star Wars fan. I married into Star Wars fandom, and so honestly, to prepare for this interview, I had to look up the different names of the episodes, and I failed. I could not find them all. It was very confusing. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask an expert. Can you give me a chronological list? Does it even work that way?
Yeah, that's a fun question in that it expresses much of the problem in the question, because George Lucas, who first came up with Star Wars, made a movie in 1976, I believe it was, 77 maybe, decided to start with number 4. Mm-hmm. So the first movie is Episode 4, A New Hope, right? And then he does Episode 4, 5, and 6, and he stops making movies for like 30 years. Not movies, but stops making Star Wars for 30 years. So you have this original trilogy.
So that's the one with the Princess Leia.
Luke Skywalker,
knows.
Princess Leia.
Okay.
As you remember, although there's a little, they come back. So the original trilogy, we call A New Hope Star Wars. People just say Star Wars, and they mean that Episode 4, A New Hope.
Okay.
Then there is The Empire Strikes Back, the second movie, Episode 5, right? Then there is Return of the Jedi, the third movie, Episode 6. And then we freeze. George Lucas goes, he does Willow, right? Which is a fun movie too, but like it wasn't quite the same hit. Cult classic, but not the same hit. He then goes back, and in the 90s, he decides to use computer graphics to make the original movies what he really thought they ought to have been. And he tinkers with those first 3 movies, Episode 4, 5, 6, and inserts some things into them. And there was a lot of excitement about this, but it didn't really get critical review, very good critical reviews, because he ended up toying with the wrong things. And a major complaint at that point was that it looked like he was just putting things in there because he could. So like, we can draw a dinosaur and have it move. Let's put one there. So he began doing stuff with the art form that wasn't really artistic. It didn't drive or get connected to the plot of the movies. And so within the fans, there was a little bit of a debate about this. Some people said, I don't care. Some people really didn't like it. And then you have, though, and this is really important for understanding fandom as well, you have the fans who saw it as it first was and were kids when they saw it then. And then you have fans who the only one they've seen is that new one that's coming out. So as it's coming out and all the fans are saying, oh, he's changing it, it's not so good, I don't like it, you got 8-year-olds being like, whoa, this is the best thing I ever saw, right? And they kind of, to them, that's what Star Wars is. Then he begins preparation for Episode 1. Fourth movie, Episode 1. Prequel. So exciting. Story of where Darth Vader came from. And the buildup for this is just gigantic. People are sleeping on the streets to get tickets. I stayed up all night and sat outside of a movie theater. Somebody had gotten tickets. We go in and people are dressed and stuff. There was a guy dressed up as Darth Maul, who's like this new bad guy with red skin and stuff, and a spiky head and a lightsaber that has two sides. Someone's dressed up like him, and someone's dressed up like Qui-Gon Jinn, who's the new Jedi trainer of Ben Kenobi, played by Liam Neeson, who's a fantastic actor. And so these guys are like doing this orchestrated lightsaber fight scene in the movie theater.
And you were down in Southern California.
This is Central California. This is college. So I'm like a sophomore in college at this point.
Okay.
But I was so excited about this thing. Just super excited about this thing. Interestingly, that fight is kind of emblematic. They do this fight, and in it, Qui-Gon Jinn, the Jedi, kills Darth Maul, the bad guy. And then we watch the movie. Well, guess who kills who in the movie? It's the other way around, right? And I remember kind of sitting by a friend, and after the movie, the comment that he made kind of summed it up, because we all sat there, and it wasn't like we were just cheering for the movie. But we watched this thing, and he turns and he says, "It's set up for number 2." Just remember that. This is set up for number 2. Which I didn't think, I was like, yeah, of course, yeah. This was just getting it ready. But the thing was, really looking back on it now, and you can find other, there's a website called Red Letter Media. Got to be aware of his, he is a horror fan who also likes to cuss, but he does a pretty dramatic and dynamic, if nitpicky, dissection of kind of what I'm going to say now with a broad brush. That bit about, let's just play with the computer graphics and people will like it because it's Star Wars, without a real story and real character development, and certainly without real dialogue and without real attention to how film had progressed in terms of camera work and shots. None of that was there. So at the end of the day, it was a bad movie. Now, remember, this is a original fan. My first experience with Star Wars, I was 3 years old. I guess I would have been 5 years old. 1983, maybe it was 82, Return of the Jedi comes out. It's like the first time I've ever taken to a movie theater. I'm walking into Jabba's palace, for Pete's sake. And I think I was terrified, hiding in my mom's skirts. But I never looked back, right? This was like in my blood a little bit. So that's who's talking about now Episode 1 and saying this is a bad movie. Now, I really like, say, the movie Die Hard with a Vengeance, even though it's a really not a good movie. It's just an action-adventure movie. Bruce Willis manages to take out a helicopter with a car by running it up a ramp on the side of a freeway, and it like hits the helicopter and takes it out. I mean, it's just cool, right? So I can understand how, if Star Wars were not what those first 3 movies were, when they were, doing what they were as story and art in society, and we haven't even talked about that, Episode 1's fine. It's just a silly movie about some kid flies a speeder around and accidentally takes out a space satellite that the bad guys are in, and he's got the Force. His mom's a virgin too, so he's like virgin birth. So you want your Christ figure? It looks like even that's even there. But it wasn't what it was. So you would like to think that the second one got better. The second one, I think, unanimously amongst all fans of all types, is like the least favorite one. So this is Episode 2, the 5th movie. I can't even tell you the name. What is it? I can't tell you the name off the top of my head. I knew it at one point. I've only watched it once. It is so bad. I have this memory of Anakin Skywalker, who is played by, I'm sure he's a fine actor, but he just comes off as this whiny punk teenage emo kid, rolling around with Princess, what's her, I can't think of her name. She's Amidala. She's from Naboo. I saw these names, right? But they're like, this is going to be Darth Vader, and then Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's dad and Princess Leia's dad. Okay. So then this is their mom, who your memory of her as a kid is like Leia talking to Luke at some point in Return of the Jedi, in this weird, like, shared emotional moment of her memories of their mother. And she doesn't know that they're brother and sister yet. And, but he knows, and he's trying to understand who his mom is. There's all this like mystical, deep emotive stuff there. And then the actual relationship on screen is like, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm good too. You know, like that's the level of dialogue that you get to. And they're like rolling around on the grass laughing about, that's all I remember. It was so bad.
So for the fans out there who are just dying because they know the name of this episode 2 is the Attack of the Clones.
Yes, Attack of the Clones.
Came out in 2002.
Right, which there's so much cool stuff in there because the world that was created after and from George Lucas's original movies, there were all sorts of fiction books that came out in the 80s, Pulp Fiction style books. There were not only video games, but like tabletop games, role-playing games. The universe got really created in a huge way. And even talking about like Attack of the Clones, the Clone War, the fact that Boba Fett is actually, I think it's Boba Fett's father is the source of all these clones. I mean, that's all cool. Like it's interesting to me. It's a world that holds together. That's fascinating. So let's super fast forward to like Solo just came out. Like, okay, we're going to do a movie in that universe with a young Han Solo, and we're just going to like see what the universe has to offer. That made me think this could be great. And you watched the movie. You watched 15 minutes of that with me. Now, tell me if this is not true. There was a lot of pictures of aliens and moving fast shooting stuff because we could. And then you're suddenly talking to a big snake woman who is telling you you're in trouble, and you're like, yeah, I'm in trouble. No, I'm not. I got the stuff. Right? Like, that's the level of dialogue. And like, why am I looking at this snake woman? Like, it's living on the CGI. It's living on the art, right? It's not even art. The ability to make things crazy looking. So that's happening. And really, again, episode 2, number 5, I think universally would be seen as the worst one. Then you have Revenge of the Sith, which is supposed to mirror Return of the Jedi. So you have the first 3 movies, Star Wars, Empire's Respect, Return of the Jedi. The Jedi are good. The Jedi win. Now we're going to do prequels that set up the time when you need this new hope of Luke Skywalker to help them win.
Right.
So you go back and your third one is Revenge of the Sith. Now the bad guys are really going to win in this one, at least in theory. Although it also very much sets up where Darth Vader came from. You have this fight scene between him and Ben Kenobi where Vader loses his hand and then more. And there's a big thing because Luke loses his hand to Vader in episode 3. In episode 3, the original Return of the Jedi. So there's all sorts of things where there's even some theme working. There's one that you have to watch all 3 movies for the one moment that matters. It is really cool that Ben Kenobi then, after basically almost killing Darth Vader, absconds with Luke and Leia, the newborn babies. And he hides Luke on the planet where you find him at the start of the first movie, Star Wars, okay? And at that moment when he's hiding him, there is these 2 suns in the sunset. And his Luke's aunt and uncle, they're not really his aunt and uncle, but they're the ones who are going to foster him, are standing there holding him with this sunset. That sunset moment in the first movie is very powerful. The music score that John Williams wrote is just at its peak at that moment. So when he closed the second trilogy with that was genius. That was great. It's like a 15-second thing in 3 2-hour movies, right? It didn't really have that the whole way through. If he'd given that much attention to character and overlap and theme, it really would have made a big difference. So these movies basically get rejected by old school fans. There's a few that like them, but they're basically rejected, and yet they create an entirely different generation of new fans who think these movies are the bee's knees because I'm 8-year-old and I got a Luke Skywalker toy. Okay. So that was even like 10 years ago. So it took quite a while to come to this idea that what if we do sequels? Like, the actors aren't dead yet. Yeah, we could get a really good director, reboot this. Disney ends up getting involved in this. I don't know at what point Disney gets in there to buy it. So they want to make money on this. Lucas is just kind of done with it, which is actually good because his hand was some of the problem in the prequels. And so, what is it? Is it J.J. Abrams? I think they get to do the Force Awakens, which is the episode 7, right? So movies 1, 2, and 3 are episodes 4, 5, 6. So now we're going to episode 7. So we're going right after Return of the Jedi, right?
Right.
Although it's not right after, but it's going to follow up on that with the actors being older. And I think every disheartened fanboy who'd had his dreams crushed by episodes 1 through 3, he just kind of said, oh, maybe. And then J.J. Abrams is enough of a fantastic director. Same guy who did, unless I'm getting this wrong, same guy who did the Star Trek reboot, right?
Okay.
So,
I think I heard
so
that.
when we're hearing that as Star Wars kids, we're like, oh, if he could do that with Star Trek,
Right.
what could he do with Star Wars, right? You're just so excited about it. And he did do a good job.
Well, as a not Star Wars fan, going in and seeing The Force Awakens, I thought it was a standalone movie enough that I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the visuals. I enjoyed the relationships that were developed. The character development was good. So yeah, it was a good film in my book.
Yeah, it was a decent film. It wasn't on par with the first 3 in terms of their timelessness. And we should probably go back and talk about, I mean, that's sort of the
Right
thing.
now we're just doing the timeline.
But it was a decent movie, and it set some things up so that afterwards you didn't say that movie was set up because you just didn't enjoy the movie. You actually thought, wow, I wonder what happens next. And part of that, this was very clever of them. Like, and I don't know why this is. The guy's not had a ton of other acting. Mark Hamill, the guy who plays Luke Skywalker, he's not done a great deal of acting in his life.
I don't.
And I don't know if some of that is his own choice. I think some of that may be his own choice. He's got enough money, but he's gonna. You hear he's gonna come back for the sequels, and you're like, oh my goodness, Luke Skywalker.
Do you know of any movies that he's done?
He was in a really bad movie called The Guyver in the 80s. It was way before its time. Great comic book.
Not MacGyver.
No, The Guyver. It's about this alien armor suit. It's like an organic armor suit that binds with this kid, and he becomes like a superhero, but he has to fight against bad ones. And it's a great cartoon, Japanese animation or what do you know, anime. Used to call it anyway. The 80s, we called it different things.
PC.
Yeah, right. I know he did that, and I believe he was in. There's at least one other movie that he's been in that time frame that wasn't quite as bad. The Guyver one was just a bad movie. They didn't have the capability to do what that movie needed,
Right.
Graphically. So the whole episode 7, the 7th movie. Oh, look at that. We kind of like came back into it, right? Episode 7 gets you to the point where the last moment is now you get to see Luke Skywalker. And I remember hearing, I think it was J.J. Abrams talk about, the reason they did that was because they wanted to establish the new generation, which is Rey and Finn, these kind of younger characters that are going to carry the series forward. So they didn't want to steal from them their backstories by shoving Luke in too fast and taking away the energy. And that makes sense to me. So like
Sure.
then you're also you can't wait to see Luke Skywalker. You only get him at the clip at the end, but you're also being told is because the next movie's his movie. And in the next movie, he's a hermit who hates doing anything good and actually gets killed at the end, even though he started. I can't even. They kill him. They just kill him. So you're like maybe there's hope. Okay, wait till the next movie. Yeah, you did a good job. Okay, and then he's a jerk and he's dead.
So now that was
The
Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi.
Okay. Now there was one that they did, and I can't remember the name of it. It was a prequel because they came out.
Okay,
with 3.
and then they have Rogue One, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah, and they have. Was there another one after Rogue One? I think there was. So Rogue One was a cool idea, and it was an okay movie.
I don't know if there was another one.
It was Rogue One then.
Yeah, because that was with the Christ figure being the robot, right?
Yeah, that was amazing.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
where he dies saving them.
That
Yeah.
was Rogue One.
But it tells you something. And this, I remember reading this. This is not me, but it's so true. When the character that the audience most embodies or associates with or finds personal connection to is a robot, then maybe your character development isn't where it should be for the movie, right? I mean, that was amazing. But they had they had this whole team of really funky, unique characters. They had the blind guy who doesn't really use the Force, but kind of does, right? They had his friend who was like this, like Mongolian style, kamikaze warrior guy, right? You never really got to know them. They didn't have depth to them. I mean, they did as an idea. They had depth. The blind Force non-Jedi guy, that's got tons of depth. They just never used it, and then they kill him. But that movie was supposed to bridge the gap between episode 3 and episode 4, between the 6th movie and the first movie. So Revenge of the Sith, everything's bad, to set up A New Hope, first movie, Star Wars, the original. Well, in that, Princess Leia's running away with the plans of the Death Star right at the start of the movie, and Rogue One tells you where those plans came from. It's the story of how that happened, right? So that was in there too. Let's go back to Last Jedi. So Last Jedi is, it's just such a strange movie to even think about. And it's received a great deal of complaint from old school fans. I don't think that a lot of new school fans are like, wow, that was my favorite, right? It's sort of odd. There's some cool moments. There's this point, I mean, I think we were talking with a young man recently where like Luke Skywalker is getting shot at by these AT-ATs, these walkers that have these massive kind of Gatling laser kind of things, and they're just plowing into him, and he uses the Force to not get hit somehow, right? And he kind of does a little finger wave motion at them, like, come on, bring it, do some more. Like, that was a cool moment. And then you learn the only reason that it worked is because he wasn't there, because he was self-projecting his image across space, which is actually impossible to do, which is why he dies, because he just wore himself out self-projecting his image to trick them. I mean, I guess that's an okay plot device. It was highly disappointing. Like, I want to see Luke Skywalker like actually stop the thing from hitting him, not pretend to stop the thing from hitting or trick him, right? And there was some cool red, they were on the salt planet stuff, so there's some cool art stuff, but you also have then, at the end of Return of the Jedi, end of episode 6, the third movie, you have established the end of this evil empire run by this dark wizard emperor that Darth Vader himself throws the guy into the Death Star, into its pit, and he dies in vapor. The Death Star gets destroyed by the Alliance. The Empire's major fleet is also destroyed by the Alliance, and you're looking at like the freedom of the universe basically at this point. And then within the time frame that has to be what, about a month, 2 months but it's these two movies, Force Awakens and whatever the one, Last Jedi, you utterly destroy the entire rebellion. So all that success is just taken away, but you don't really get to see it happen. You're just told that it happens. They're all fighting politically. They can't work together. And now all that's left is this one ship running away, and they're all in this one ship, and there's the Empire with more stuff shooting at the one ship, and then almost everyone on the one ship dies, and then they get down to this planet, and even more of them die, and then finally they escape on the Millennium Falcon, and there's like 20 people. And you're like, why did I watch the first movies? Like, this is not building. I could see that like hundreds of years later that you're back in that situation, but not with the same. I mean, Princess Leia is on the ship, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So it continued to, for me, be, I don't know what it proves, but for me, it was sort of the nail in the coffin in terms of I have no hope or care about the next movie at all, because there's really nothing that can be done to make it the kind of storytelling that Star Wars was. Mm-hmm. It could be a fun movie. Fine. I like fun movies. I don't really like fun movies that take my favorite things and don't do the best things you can do with them. I'll use an example to describe. There were a number of movies made with the Transformers in the last 15, 20 years by, I can't remember the name of the director now. But those movies had a bit of hype for guys like me who in the 80s played with Transformers, and they were never well received by us. And somebody said, he described it very well. You didn't like that movie, Jonathan, because it wasn't a Transformers movie. It was Michael Bay blowing up big robots that turn into cars. That's what that was. And it's like, oh yeah, that's what it was. They took this idea, robots are cars, okay, and then they just forgot everything else, used the names, but everything else was gone. All the soul was gone. And yeah, so you don't like it if you're already a fan. If you're not already a fan, like, it might be just fine.
So as I've talked to fans and noted what kind of people are really diehard, true Star Wars fans, or even just not, but really enjoy Star Wars, I'm noticing there are people who love complex stories. And as I'm listening to you and I'm trying to follow the story, and it's a little overwhelming. I mean, this is an intense story with lots of facets coming in and out and in and out. So I guess that kind of answers one of my questions as I'm wrestling personally with, why did I never like it? Well, it's not that I don't like complex stories, but I'm noticing this commonality between fans.
Well, let me throw that back at you. Now, putting all the cards on the table. If you don't know, this is my wife, by the way. We haven't introduced her yet.
That's right.
This is my wife. You and I have enjoyed watching Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Game of Thrones is entertaining because it is a tremendously complex story founded on character development. The characters are believable and face complex, conflicting situations and hard decisions. You know who the Lannisters are, right?
Right.
You know, what was I can't even think of what the thing was called, the fire stuff that burned on the water. If someone were to talk about the mountain or the dog, right? So it's not complex stories that you don't like.
No, it's not. Honestly, I think it has to do with, are we going there?
I don't know.
Okay.
Space? Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, I have this intense hatred of space. I do. And then you combine that with names that I can't pronounce.
Right.
And then, so it's almost like I feel as though I should go to a class called Star Wars language class and learn the language so that I can know everybody's name and I can know what they're talking about. And so that's frustrating to me as a person who just is not completely invested, and nor do I really want to invest the time.
Right.
And I think that's part of it too. It takes so much time investment to really get into it.
Right.
Now, did I invest time in learning who the Game of Thrones people are? Yes, I did. But it was the dog. That's English.
Yes.
A Wookiee.
That's a walking carpet. That's an inside joke. Yeah. Okay. So you got something there with lore. Geeks like lore.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's part of the issue. But then the reason why geeks have lore, at least, that's not quite right, but for me, when I was 8 and there wasn't internet, I could watch a 2-hour movie 35, 75 times. I don't know how many times I watched Star Wars, the first one. I have no idea. I have almost the whole thing memorized.
I have Lady and the Tramp
Right.
memorized.
So
even the score.
As an adult now, to invest that time is impossible. Let alone not wise. Even as a child now, there's so much more that you can watch. I remember going down to the basement where it was pre-DVDs. There were these laser discs, these huge discs that my dad had bought this machine. So you have VHS cassette movies, and then he had this laser disc thing that was supposed to be new, and I think it had like 8 movies. So that's it. Like all summer, I got 8 movies.
Right.
Right. And so, of course, I'm going to go to that one and not to, I don't know what the other ones were. There were a couple good ones. But
Flipper and a Rose.
no, that was on VHS. But no, yeah, I wouldn't have gone to that one. Yeah. So something about the lore, but there is, I think you're right though, because I don't think you just like lore. You don't just gravitate toward stories that have lore.
No, I don't.
Yeah. And so that there is something there. But what I like about lore, the reason I'm driven by it is what you were talking about earlier. I love how regularly the lore informs or echoes ultimate virtue, truth, Christian reality.
Right. Now, so then saying that was, so I really want to get to when did you become a fan? Just so that we have that history. I mean, you kind of explained a little bit, touched on it here and there as you were telling us the timeline of Star Wars, but I want to know when you became a fan, and then like how this leads kind of into what you were just saying. How have you been disappointed by the lore? As you've grown in your understanding of Christianity, has that impacted your appreciation?
It has impacted my appreciation. I don't know that that's kind of a two-edged question, because I am not disappointed at all in the lore of Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. And I continue to see in that tremendous value in storytelling. And we can talk more about how specifically that works itself into Christ types and whatnot. So I'm not disappointed in that. I forgot what the other question was now.
I wanted to know when when it all started.
I think that's really interesting.
In 83 when you were with your folks.
I have that memory, and I don't have another memory of like a cognizant decision or experience event that said, oh, Star Wars. It's like it was just always there. I know that when I was 16, I had a bookshelf built into the wall in my room, and one entire shelf was the pantheon idolatry of Star Wars. I mean, it was, there were all sorts of toys and puzzles and memorabilia and things I collected. And as a kid, I didn't have a great deal of money. I had a lot for like world standards, but for American standards, we were lower middle class. It wasn't like I just had $50 a week to go spend on this stuff. So this stuff was really important to me. I remember I had a buddy that we both geeked out on Star Wars a bit, and he kind of did the same thing in his room, and we'd look at each other's things and like just think about how great it was and wish that they'd make more movies. But it was always there. Right? There was never a time that I was not a Star Wars fan, which again is what made it so destructive when the prequels were so bad, in my opinion. You don't have to say that, like just in case, because there's people who are offended.
Don't throw tomatoes through the podcast.
And doubly destructive when The Last Jedi really was like, oh no, the Jedi aren't really good, and Luke Skywalker just is not good, and he's dead too, and now you got to follow this girl who's got the Force, but is also not good because she actually gave herself to the dark side. I don't know if anyone picked up on that. She did this like thing where she like went into the dark space. She wasn't supposed to. Who knows how they're gonna work it out? But it's just like, okay, I've given you enough of my life. It probably wasn't healthy how much I liked it in the first place as a kid. I mean, this is the story of my faith and its vanishing and returning through high school and into college is another thing. So I'm not gonna blame Star Wars for that, but I definitely over-focused my energy or my emotion on things that today I still do a lot of gaming, but I don't. It's not life to me. Mm-hmm. It's a pastime instead. I don't know. Maybe Star Wars wasn't life to me back then either, but it was. I'm kind of lost on it. There was never a time that it wasn't there. As a result, now that I've broken from it twice, like. It's not going back, sure. Right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Yeah. So that's kind of where that stands. That's how I feel about this upcoming film. I mean, unless the thing is like, even if it wins Oscars, doesn't mean anything these days. Oscars are given to the most politically correct movie. So I can't imagine what would make me want to look back into that. Whereas I am more than happy, and we have, to intentionally expose my children to episodes 4, 5, and 6, to tell them there are other movies. When they ask to see them, to say, no, you don't want to ruin it. You know, and then when they're 18, you know, if they want to ruin it, they can't. But to have them have that experience because of the character development in those movies, and it's a combination of Han Solo's redemption, as Han goes from being a huckster to being one willing to sacrifice himself for others. You have Luke's kind of growth trajectory also is to be the self-sacrificial one who wins by losing, refuses to take violence as the final step, and instead have the truth of the mind overcome, even if it means he has to die. And there's one other character. Oh, and then it's the redemption of Darth Vader. So one of the first scenes you see in the first movie is this hallway that's very stark. So it's beautifully done. This hallway that's all white, spaceship hallway, but a little decayed. It's not brand new glistening, but it's very bright. And you got these rebel soldiers with this weird helmets on, lining up, and you hear this noise going on because they're being taken in their ship inside this much bigger ship. And then suddenly there's smoke and light flashing around this door as the Empire is going to break through the door and knock their way in. And it's cloud comes through, and then there's just laser beams, and the rebel guys are just demolished. They lose so fast. The stormtroopers come in. They're dressed in these white outfits. You've seen the stormtrooper, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So these really stark things modeled after Nazi imagery, actually. And they come through, and they just wipe these guys out, maybe lose 2 guys, and come through. And then moments later, in walks this guy in all black with this flowing cape and this big mask going, and you got James Earl Jones' voice, right? And this is the bad guy. Well, the 3-movie arc is his redemption, of him repenting of being evil and choosing good for the sake of the son that he loves, right? Luke. Because of Luke's willingness to not fight and let himself be killed, Darth Vader stands between Luke and the one who would kill him and ends up defeating him. It's potent stuff. We can talk more about it. There are weaknesses in the films. Their dialogue isn't that great. George Lucas wasn't a good dialogue writer, but the actors were such good actors that they carry it. And then this is to say nothing of, these movies would never have been what they are without the score that John Williams wrote.
Right.
That made the movies.
In some ways, I think that's what movie medium is. Mm-hmm. It's playing with your emotions and telling you what you need to feel by leading you there with the music. I mean, it's suspenseful, and so they have the suspenseful music, right. And then it's romantic, and so there's the lighthearted string instruments, and it leads you there emotionally. So yeah, I agree.
It's the power of mixed media. So it's not just movies, but the idea that if I take audio and visual, and I'm giving you pictures that are saying one thing,
right,
and I'm giving you sounds that are saying another thing, and I know how to do that well, I can make you change your mind and you won't know what happened, right? It is that deceptive a tool. It's tremendously powerful. Now, ideally, we don't use it for evil, right? That these stories, or this ability to tell story information, could be used for great good, which is again why when virtue becomes the message of the story, it's enjoyable. I love a story that's told well, where the music is used to pull you toward Christ figures and sacrifice, as opposed to trying to convince you of, well, and any of the ones that are just bad at it, where they're just like every movie from the 80s with its keyboards, the keyboard soundtracks, and you're just like, oh, it's so bad.
So you would say that 4, 5, and 6 have that virtue?
Oh yeah, for sure.
1, 2, and 3?
No.
Can you find it amidst the bad art? Or it just isn't there?
I mean, Qui-Gon Jinn, who we mentioned earlier, this Jedi who dies, I mean, he sort of dies
Honorably.
honorably, trying to protect stuff. It's sort of just an accident too. I mean, in The Force Awakens, Han dies.
Right.
Is that the right one?
No.
Or was that in Last Jedi? No,
That's Last Jedi, I believe.
you're right, it is. It is. He dies doing the same thing that Luke did. Going to and the guy's dressed in black, right? As he's trying to be like Darth Vader, because it's his grandpa. Yeah. Yeah. He's sigh on that one. But Han decides there's still good in him. I will seek his redemption, and he dies for it. It's a powerful moment.
It's powerful, yet at the same time, he decides to die for the virtue, but as a story, the evil wins.
The evil
so
wins.
it's like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
can we really cling to that and be like, yeah?
I think you're supposed to hope that maybe Kylo Ren will still come around in the third movie, maybe? I don't know, but it's exactly it. It's like, okay, I'm kind of done now, right? And you're right, the evil wins. So, in again, those first 3 movies, they're such paper-thin movies to find the virtue in it. And not having seen them, I mean, I've seen 2 and 3 once each.
Right.
So I really can't speak to complexities. It was that uninteresting to me. Does Ben Kenobi really end up doing good as he has to make Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader are the same guy. Okay. So Ben Kenobi was Anakin's teacher in the Force, and then Anakin becomes evil, becomes Darth Vader, and so Ben Kenobi has to stop him. And he ends up almost killing him, which is what causes him to need the suit then later to breathe and stuff, because he just got so beat up by Ben Kenobi. So my guess is that somewhere in there is this idea of Ben Kenobi having to destroy his own disciple whom he loved, whom he cared for, and being there's a tragedy at work there, and there's something for tragedy. I mean, evil wins sometimes in tragedy, and it makes you feel bad because it's tragic, right? That's
Right.
the thing. But then this is where you're the one getting the phone calls today. The guy who does the Red Letter Media reviews, kind of, I'm borrowing from him here as well. So, okay, Ben Kenobi has to destroy the one he loves, who he taught. They're so close. So where do you ever see them on film being close? And he shows you all these clips of the times they're in conversation, like all the way through the movies, and they're just yelling at each other. Like, they're not friends. Ever. One's a snotty kid and one's a grumpy old master. Like, there's no bond. So even that moment that could be this really gripping, hard thing is just sort of, and then you're distracted because there's just lava flying everywhere, because that's all they really care about, is getting the cool, big, epic shots, you know? So yeah, I'm sure it's there, and I'm sure a real fan of those movies could find something. For me, it's like a why? Why would I want to go to bad film to learn from it about truth, right?
Right.
I'd just as soon say that one's not that good. Let's look at the good ones.
So, then was that it? Was that why you, in the end, were just like, ugh, I wash my hands of it? You were let down by the story going towards virtue, and it didn't.
That may have something to do with it, without me knowing it. I mean, my worldview is driven by Christianity, and so I can only stomach so long things that don't give me something to attach my Christianity to.
Right.
I think, again, Game of Thrones here becomes really interesting because there are people who are really against it, mainly because HBO put some boobs
I mean,
in
we
there.
we could go to Harry Potter.
I think Game of Thrones is better though, because Harry Potter, particularly as movie, I don't think they're very good movies.
Oh, yeah.
They're okay. They're okay, but they're not like, these are not going to be enduring films. The reason that I have enjoyed Game of Thrones so much is not because of some crassness here or there.
Right.
The reason I have enjoyed it is because the characters in them are so real in their interpersonal life. They're not good or evil. They are people who sometimes make more good or more evil decisions, but almost every single one of them is capable of surprising you,
Right.
with an honest to goodness heart. And to me, that demonstration of the complexity of every human on this planet, none of whom really are trying to be evil, but all of whom are, or myself, as I'm trying to be good and yet find sin living within me. I mean, Jaime Lannister, this guy who he's selfish, narcissistic, broken, and yet has mercy, right? And you see him increasingly wrestle with realizing that his position is the wrong one and beginning to sabotage his own wickedness. I don't know if that's where it's going to... we haven't watched the last season that came out, and there's one more coming, so who knows what happens next. Maybe it all gets terrible after that. But that's what draws me, though. So I'm able to attach my doctrine of original sin to these characters because they actually portray original sinners, not cookie cutter good bad guys, right? And that amplifies for me personally my own experience of original sin. Even though I don't want to be Cersei Lannister, I don't think anyone should be Cersei Lannister. Her self-collapse is so exactly how it happens when your pride gets you. She is exactly what someone who is never able to say she's wrong becomes eventually and is driven to eventually. Jon Snow, as he wrestles with his lack of heritage and his desire to do good and trying to help a group of people who can't see what's best for them, to take the stand against the great evil that's coming. I mean, I don't think he's quite as complex actually, but he's a very, very compelling guy. The death of his brother Robb, it was brutal. I wanted to quit after that episode.
Right.
I wanted to quit because I was so hopeful in him, and yet he put himself there. He put himself there by following his libido rather than his commitment to Mary. You remember that? No? The reason he gets killed is because he's trying to apologize to the guy who was supposed to marry his daughter, but he married this other girl instead who was like an artist that he ran into in a camp somewhere kind of thing, or, she worked with herbs or something. Married her instead to make her queen, goes to apologize, and the guy says, I'll accept your apology, come on for dinner, and then he kills him. So he put himself in that situation. So you have this weird Romeo-Juliet bad decision-making thing going on. So all of that, to me, gets to why story is story, what story is valuable for. When you see real people going through things that echo what you go through, handling experiences the way you would handle experiences, struggling with those experiences, we're driven to that.
Yeah.
Period, as humans. We're just driven by that. And then when the plot is able to reflect sacrifice and virtue, now it's even better. So why do we like Jon Snow? Because he is virtuous. Because he's virtuous, and then what happens? Does he die and rise again? Wait a minute. Yes, he does. Hey, I've heard of that before. That happened somewhere else, right? In another story? I think it did, right? So you have all that going on. And the more a story can do that, regardless of what setting it's in, the more I'm going to be pulled into it.
For me personally, I think that the setting helps me to relate to it. Helps me to feel like they are experiencing something that I could experience and respond to. I don't interact with huge slugs.
Right.
It's just not part of my
Right.
day-to-day
It's
life.
funny. I was thinking about that exact image as you were saying this. I'm like, that moment there, like everyone's acting like she's normal. That's not how we are. We react to someone who's that disgusting and ugly. Is this giant slug thing. We are not going to be like, oh, just talking, having a day. Hey, how you doing?
Oh, in Solo, we're
Yeah.
talking about, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and then there's another slug guy in, what number is it? It's when Leia gets kidnapped and she is put in chains and he's her king or something.
Jabba the Hutt.
Oh, yes.
And the thing about that guy, though, it's just interesting. And people are disturbed and disgusted by him. He's a puppet, not a CGI.
Right.
So there's something very tactile about him. It doesn't have this. It's jarring, but you don't feel like it's flat. If you go back and watch it again, you're not going to have to. But I think anybody who's a fan is going to be with me on this. That it's not flat. There's something very complex about him.
CGI makes things more challenging.
She was a cartoon. She was a cartoon talking to him, but it was a disgusting cartoon, right? I didn't think there was actually a slug in the room.
Right.
A giant slug. With the puppet, I did. It was real. It's a character.
But I find that as you talk to the younger fans, like you were mentioning, this was what was available when you were 8. And so you clung to it. And speaking to younger fans, friends of our kids who are fans, they're super attracted to the fight scenes and the ships and all of the, I don't know if that's CGI or like what you would consider that, but the graphics as well. And so when does the story start hitting you? At what age do you watch a show and actually say, hey, I like this because that character was honorable. I love watching Disney's live action Cinderella, especially with the kids, because then I can turn around and I can say, have courage and be kind to them. Forgive your enemies. I can pull those themes out. I don't know if they pull them out themselves yet. Well,
I think that gets back to the mixed media. The movies do put them in. Whether or not the kid is thinking it through, they're being influenced by the worldview that the movie has. I would say that the newer Star Wars movies have so little in them of any real spiritual content that it's sort of just like eating ice cream.
So you think that the Force, that whole spiritual force,
I don't think it's
lowered in the newer ones?
Yeah, I think it was far more possibly convincing you to think that way in the earlier movies than the present ones. It's just magic now. It's just this kind of magic thing that happens.
So then as Christians, you mentioned Game of Thrones being kind of a controversial thing, but having virtue. I mentioned, we could go to the Harry Potter route. That's got the magic thing that's been controversial in Christian circles. How do we, maybe as Christian parents, as Christian adults, as Christian, Christians just out there, when do we say, well, that's too much? Or is it possible that we can always see things through our worldview?
I think we always can. It doesn't mean we always want to. So again, for me, my worldview can only take so much of it being directly attacked before I'm just like, I don't want to waste my time defending myself anymore, right? But you can observe anything as a Christian and discern, according to the Word of God, truth and falsehood. The more that it is against your worldview directly, the less you're going to enjoy it. You're just not going to enjoy seeing things that disturb you or disgust you. And so you have a level, and everyone's going to have different abilities to kind of ignore some things and not other things as well. Yes, you can, or not can, but you should, you must observe all things through your worldview. And then as a parent, at a certain point, you say, I need to teach my children how to do this. And you also recognize that they're only able to kind of discern so much And so there are things that they shouldn't see yet. And so kind of spacing that out a little bit. I feel like you had another question in there that I missed a little bit of. But back on the friends who have kids who really like the new Star Wars movies, my guess is that's what we call a phase. That'll pass the way that He-Man passed for me. I loved He-Man. He-Man was great. Play with the toys. I think I heard they're making a He-Man movie. I don't know. I might be interested, but yeah, not really a thing.
So it's just not as lasting and enduring.
No.
It's not a classic.
No. The reason those other movies endured was because they're enduring movies, and the new ones aren't. And so they're not going to be the thing that those kids are like in their 30s, like, my life is episode 8 of Star Wars. It's just not going to be there. What has, I think, potential for that is what the miracle that the Marvel stuff has been in terms of these characters of virtue who are complex. They're not quite as complex as Game of Thrones characters, but they definitely are not perfect. And this was something that Stan Lee, as a comic book writer, did with them as comic book characters in the 60s, which turned that industry upside down. And why Marvel is what it was as a comic book company. But what they've been able to do then on film with that, I think those movies will be watched and rewatched for decades.
That is something that I do appreciate with the Marvel movies is it lays out, well, especially for interacting with my son, I can say Captain America wouldn't respond that way. What would he do?
Right.
Or, well, Thor I can't use as much, but
he gets better.
He does. He definitely does, but he's not as in your face as Captain America is. But there is, behind all of the Marvel adventures, a desire to save the world, to put themselves in harm's way for the good of humanity.
To put themselves at risk, yeah. Well, so you don't like Iron Man much because he's kind of a jerk. Tony Stark is kind of a jerk. But that's kind of the point, that by the time you've seen 3 of his movies and woven in Cap and Thor, and you get to Avengers 1, and the guy who's willing to die to save the world by taking a nuclear bomb up into far off space where Thanos' legions are, and it's going to close behind him and blow up stuff up there, and he's just going to be dead in space, it's Tony Stark. And he passes out, and his thing stops working, he passes out, and he's dead. And he barely falls through that hole, right? And comes and Hulk catches him, and everyone thinks he's dead when they pull his mask off, right? Hulk's that only happens when Tony Stark's a jerk at the start. Like, the reason that's valuable, if it was just Tony's a great guy, and he goes, that'd be valuable too. But the complexity of the sinner saint here, right? Of the one who ultimately is selfish, but then learns, or originally is selfish, but learns sacrifice.
And I think it's going through his journey with him as you watch the show that endears you to him, so that when he is at that moment of going to sacrifice himself, you as the viewer are saying, no, don't do it.
Yeah, or you care.
Because you don't want to lose him.
Yeah, you care that he's dead.
Right. So, Rey, Finn, not so much. And I can't remember what the son of... he kills Han Solo.
Oh, Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren. I know. I wanted to say Chloe, and I was like,
they're just sounds. You're so right, though. Like, they're just sounds at this point. We're just gonna hoppy-lo-hoopy-doo. I wrote stories as a kid about like the land of Babalubushka, I don't know. Hopefully, you learned as a science fiction writer, fantasy writer, to do that without just sounding like noises. But they really do in the new Star Wars stuff. They just sound like noises. There isn't a culture to them. The thing about the old Star Wars lore and the comic books and all this stuff is it developed a culture of that civilization a long time ago in a galaxy far. There was a culture, and many cultures there that fit, and now it's just sort of like throwing spaghetti at a wall over and over again and just, oh, that looks good. Draw that color, Rey, Finn, no, I don't see much of real redeeming quality in their characters. I mean, they're not bad people, but there's nothing like compelling about them. The most compelling thing about them, and here we can get in trouble. We'll see who's listening this long. One's a woman and one's black.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to bring that up.
That's it.
And then somebody told me, a fan, oh, we just loved Rogue One because the heroine is Asian. And I thought, what?
Yeah, no, not the heroine.
She's the little pilot.
Yeah, I think she's not in.
It's not Rogue One.
She's not. I think she's in. No, you're thinking of The Last Jedi.
Okay. Whoa, really? Oh, that's such a long movie.
And she's a pilot, and like her twin sister like was on the bomber that like gets blown up right at the very start.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a fan involved.
Yeah, I don't know, but what I do know is that that particular actress has had quite a ride as a result of being who she was in that movie, including some real hate she received in online scenarios, being called names.
Really?
Mm-hmm. But then she's also pushed back with her own kind of version of social justice on the matter, which calls the haters out, I think, in little ways, brings it on yourself. But why is she known? It's not because her character was such a compelling and interesting character.
Well, and that was what bothered me about that comment. It was so flat. It was like, really? Because she's an Asian? Like, I didn't really care what color her skin was or what her nationality was. If I recall,
the blind non-Jedi was an Asian guy too, and he was awesome. And he didn't get, but she was female, and we're so trapped in this actual racist, actual sexist reality where we really care about not the character or the human, but simply the color of their skin or their genitalia, and that this is the proof of good and evil now.
Right.
Is the opposite of Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream. It's very opposite of it, and it is dominant. So to Black Panther did not win Best Picture last night at the Oscars, nor should it have ever been nominated for Best Picture. I enjoyed the movie. I watched it 3 times in the theater. It is not the best Marvel movie that they have made, and it is by no means in a class of movies that could possibly be called Best Picture. I would be okay with somebody putting Avengers 3 with Thanos in that category strictly because they managed to take a decade's worth of films, 20 characters, over 20 movies, and pull it into one movie and do what they did with that. That's like, yeah, okay, you're a director. You are a director. Man, right? But it still isn't. You compare that to some of the movies that, Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan or Shawshank Redemption. It's just a different category of movie. The reason Black Panther got nominated is because it's about having
African culture.
Yeah, which is
wrong because it's not. It's made up, right?
Well, it is, but what I don't understand, and again, you can hate me out there for this. What I don't understand is how a movie about a wealthy African nation is a triumph for American impoverished blacks. Now I get it. So if you're here's why. So the guy who is the main actor who plays Prince T'Challa, he had been told previously as an actor in his life, there are no mainline hero roles given to black men. We don't have a role for you in that. How about this? How about this side part? How about this other thing here? And so now here is he, as a black man, doing a movie as the frontliner that does internationally tons and tons of money, does very well. That is a triumph. That is a success. That is a beautiful thing. But the reason it was successful ultimately as a movie, as a good movie, isn't because he was black. It's because his character is awesome. He's a just king, striving to hold together a fragmented empire and decide whether the way they engaged with the world in the past was selfish, and maybe they should be for the world, not against the world. That's something. But I don't think that's, again, why. I mean, all the stuff I see in media about it is all about not him, but the bad guy. The bad guy has been lifted up as this triumph of American spirit because of a line that he has at the very end. I mean, he's this tremendously awful human, right? Just violent, brutal, hateful. And the idea is that he was made this way because he grew up in the ghetto without a father, and that therefore he has to be this way, right? And this is the American impoverished community, black community. It's not all blacks are impoverished, but I tend to think that it's poverty, not blackness or whiteness or anything. Poverty is an issue, but you have to turn into this guy. So there's this line he says at the end, because T'Challa has stabbed him in the side, and then is like, look, we got like magic science here. We can save you. Like he does the just king thing, right? He shows mercy to his enemy. And there's this line he says that has, again, been lauded as this magnificent moment where he says, and I'm gonna miss the front of it. He basically says, I don't want to be a slave. I'll be a slave if you save me. And then he says, just throw my ashes in the sea so I can be with my ancestors who jumped off the ship rather than live as slaves. And I saw an article recently in which, like, the writers were afraid that line was going to get cut. The directors were afraid it was going to get cut. And then Marvel's like, no, it's the best line in the movie. It's the most important line in the movie. It's so valuable. What I see in it is hate. So I don't see it as valuable at all. Rather than have your enemy reconcile with you, you would rather die. It's tragic. It's tragic. I don't mind it as tragic because it does fit with his character. His character is a complete evil man. It's that then the response of culture to this, saying this is so great because somehow it's good for black people. I don't get that. I don't see how holding on to a grudge that would cause you to rather die than reconcile is good for race relations in our country from any side. It doesn't make any sense. And this is all without saying, I have to point out the logical fallacy that if your ancestors jumped in the water, then they're not your ancestors.
That was what I was hung up on. I was like, I really don't get this quote.
No, it doesn't make any sense. No, your ancestors in that case were slaves. But here's the other thing. This the same character, for Pete's sake, is from Wakanda. This is his country. This is his land. His ancestors are there, right there. Like, this guy's his cousin. T'Challa's his cousin. These are your family. But it's true. His mom was an African-American woman living in LA somewhere that the brother ends up being with and having the child, right? Okay. So, but that doesn't guarantee she was a slave. It's possible, right? But not every black person in this country is descended from slavery. There were free slaves, or not free slaves. There are free blacks in the North, right? So it just, what's sad to me about it then, so this is why it got nominated for Best Picture. Not because T'Challa was this dynamic, amazing character who changes his society for the good, but because the antagonist was a race-baiting social justice non-warrior, didn't want social justice. And that scares me for our country, you know, because this conversation, who knows how people will chop it up or not. I'm small enough at this point that nobody cares really. But, 20 years from now, who knows how this could be used. They cut a line here or there and they make you sound like you're saying something you're not. But I want to see the people of the United States of America embodying who Captain America is, not because he's white, but because he's virtuous.
Right. And
I like what that image of the past, the 30s, 40s, 50s idea was, not because it was white, although there were a lot of white people at that time. A majority of the country is white. So you have, a majority of the stuff that's being produced is being produced by that culture. They're producing it for that culture. Does that mean that how the South was dealt with and Jim Crow laws, all this kind of stuff, that was good? No, not at all. But you can't like get mad at somebody that like when I draw a picture of myself, right? Of my culture, right? And so what I would love to see more of is for African American or Asian American culture to produce art that reflects itself. And I don't think that most modern Americans would reject it because it's black or Asian or otherwise. If it's good and if it promotes virtue, I think people will love it. But we're so busy convinced to believe in this victim mentality, this idea that we need reparations of some kind for things that happened hundreds of years ago, that we can't do what's in front of us right now. Now I wandered there a little bit.
Well, are you done?
Well, I want to bring it back to the point that what I like about T'Challa is that he is Captain America.
Yeah.
They're the same. And they even show this in the movie because they're both running out at the front of the army. The only thing I didn't like about that is that they have T'Challa outrace him by like a small amount. And it would have been so much more for reconciliation between cultures if they were equal.
Yeah.
Oh, why weren't they equal? But it's fine. It's fine. He got a head start or something, right? I can overlook it. They're mirrors of each other. And it is a tribute to the goodness of human spirit as we were created to be, and the goodness of king as king is created to be. So for T'Challa particularly as king who will go to the front, Yahweh, Lord of Sabaoth, he will fight for his people, right? He will not let the evil imposter take the throne. He will die and rise. For Pete's sake, he dies and rises. Right? Yeah. Jeez. It's always there.
That's true. Well, I mean, on that note, you had wanted to come back to the storytelling side of things and how Christianity is either in a good story or perhaps it's not a good story.
Yeah. I don't know that I can prove that, but I'm pretty sure it's true. So if you don't reflect the greatest story ever told, at least a smidgen, you tell a bad story. And there are movies that kind of maybe do that on purpose, like just crass horror movie, screamer kind of thing, right? Although even then, someone's got to get saved at the end of it, So there is always an overlap. There's a way about talking about language called a semantic field. So words that we use each of them has a thing called a semantic field. So think of meaning, but the semantic field is where there is more than one meaning to a word. So it can have a range of meaning. Sometimes it can be changed by its inflection. Sometimes it can be changed by it's a synonym of some kind, or not a homonym. That's the one, right? That it sounds the same but means different things, right? You and I had a conversation the other night with our kids about a certain word that has 4 letters that we'd prefer not to be used at the dinner table, generally speaking. And they were asking what it meant, right? That word's got a semantic feel like no one's business. That word can mean like anything, which reminds me of Smurf. There's an old Smurf movie where the word Smurf just means whatever you want it to mean in any sentence. You just say Smurf instead. It's kind of like that. So semantic field. So then you have words that have these fields of meaning, and a synonym is where like there's this overlap between them, right? So that cool and cold have overlapping semantic fields, but they have they're not the same word. So you would use cool to mean one thing and cold to mean something else. And we're not talking about like awesome. We're talking just about, is it cool or is it cold? But they overlap. So if you can think of that and then realize that all stories have semantic fields of meaning, and that the greatness of your story will be how much the overlap with Christ's history and Christ's revelation is. The greater that overlap without you knowing that it's happening, the greater your story will be. If I tell you it's happening, then it becomes wooden and becomes analogy. Pilgrim's Progress, is really kind of, well, I'm not going to tell you what to think now, right? As opposed to you don't really see it. So you're not thinking that Iron Man is Jesus, right? As he falls through the thing. There's a moment where Chris Pratt playing Star-Lord, it's like every one of these heroes has died. Star-Lord goes out to save Gamora, and he's giving her the air so she can breathe in space where you don't want to be because it's scary, right? And he dies, and he does, as he falls, he puts his hands out, cross form, and I think the first time we watched that, it was at home, and I paused it. I'm like, "Do you see it, kids? Do you see it? Look, it's right there." But you don't have to do the cross thing either, though. The strength of it is to kind of let the truth be enough on its own. So yeah, I can't prove this. I haven't done a study of every story ever told, and whether or not this applies, but it applies an awful lot. And if you find that you've loved a story, and you go back and you just start asking, if I had to outline the main plot and the main character reasons, what happened, you will find Christ almost inevitably, I think.
So as an observer to Star Wars, as a lore, as a story, I have gotten very confused over the years. Growing up and hearing about it, when I did and how I did, I thought the dark side was evil. Now in these latter days, I am not so sure. Is the dark side evil still, or is it good?
Well, it's evil, but it also is part of. And this is where the kind of the juju Eastern thought comes in. You need balance. So it's like a hackneyed approach to the yin yang. But see, the yin yang, the hot cold of the yin yang, isn't really about good and evil. That's a Western appropriation of it that misunderstands it, which is sort of then what Star Wars has done. And it's taken this idea of ultimate good and ultimate evil being in like just complete relationship with each other and always needed to be balanced so that you can never actually have good triumph. It has to kind of come back and be somewhere in the middle, and that's what the real good would be. So you have the good that's against evil, and then you have the real good of balance, sort of like floats over the top. That's weird. I'm not sure that really is Eastern mysticism. It may be. I don't know anybody in the world that actually thinks that about their life. Nobody like burns every other meal to make it balanced, right? Like there's good and then there's evil. But that's sort of the direction that it went as a story. And that may be sort of the source of its incoherence as a storytelling arc, because it was about redemption, and then it became instead about, circular loops of balance. The good guy wins, the bad guy wins, the good guy wins, the bad. I mean, okay, that's not exciting at all.
So would you say then it's so the movies 4, 5, and 6 were more Christological in their storytelling, and then it moved to a New Age Eastern thought?
Well, I would say that the first movies were definitely about good triumphing over evil. Mm-hmm. And then it moved to there is no good or evil, there's only cycles.
Okay.
Although there's still good and evil, and you're still supposed to cheer for the hero, right?
So that's more Buddhist or Hindu.
I think that may be a straw man version of Buddhism. Okay. The more that I kind of engage Eastern thought, Buddhist thought, I mean, Hindu's a little different, not a little, it's a lot different. The more I engage Buddhist thought, I think that we have a caricature of them. And we don't necessarily represent, whoever's talking about Buddhism wherever may not really be representing it very well. Because most of what Buddhism seems to teach is not that there is a balance between good and evil and we should aim for the balance. It teaches more of that there's a non-existence of either good or evil, and that in seeking that non-existence, you will find real good. But that means that the Dalai Lama, I mean, he's not telling you don't love your neighbor, right? or that it's okay that we have people that don't love their neighbor because we have to have balance. Like that's nowhere in their system at all. They're always driving toward a more gentle and respectable and honorable approach to life and to love. And where I'll have disagreements with it, but I don't want to stereotype them as something that they're not and disagree with something that they aren't really at all. But then that is effectively the best message I can pull out of episodes 1 through 3, and then again the new ones even, is that there just isn't really a good or evil at all. It's just back and forth, and we call them evil, and we cheer against them, and we call them good, and we cheer for them, but there's no triumph. That's just it. So Return of the Jedi, you got this massive triumph, and then we're gonna do sequels, and we just, rather than come up with some new thing, we have the same bad guys just win and take away what was won before by the good guys. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Do I see a Christ figure in episodes 4, 5, and 6? Not the way that the Marvel movies have done it, where it's just so blatantly obvious. Yeah, Luke going in the third one to put himself, but kind of there to be killed to save his fathers is very close. You do have a Han Solo dies and rises between the second and third movie when he's frozen in carbonite, but he's not necessarily put into that situation by his self-sacrificial nature. What makes that so powerful is it only happens as he and Leia are falling in love with each other, and she doesn't really realize it, that she is in love with him, and he's not as bad as she thought, and he's trying to be good. She only realizes that as he's being sunk down into the frozen stuff. And so she calls out, "I love you." And he says, "I know." And he dies, right? It doesn't really die, but he's frozen. And then he comes back at the end, not the end, at the start of the next movie, and she sneaks in as this like pretend bounty hunter with this weird like mask that like that, right. And then sneaks up and like lets him out, and she's talking to him about the carbon hibernation sickness will dispel. I can't see. It'll come back, and he finally is like, "Who are you?" And she takes her mask off. She says, "Someone who loves you." Like, so that tie-in, right, of that moment. Not really a Christ figure thing though. That's about, but it is about sacrifice. It is about commitment and bonding to each other. That she would risk her life to go save him at that point. And that's how she ends up on the chain at Jabba's feet, by the way, is right there, right? So, but it is those movies are not driven. When we talk about that overlapping semantic field, there's not a strong overlapping self-sacrificial single character death and resurrection moment. But there is in the first one, what you have in Luke is the unexpected hero. And he is willing to go and do what he believes is good, even though it means he might be on the losing side. And he is unique and special. He is somehow, and they don't ever tell you this. I mean, being Darth Vader's son kind of did it, but somehow he is strong with the Force, but he is a more important human than everybody else. I guess strong with the Force is the closest they come to it. And there's an overlap there with the only begotten Son of God. He is special. He is more important. He has an ability that we've been waiting for. Luke Skywalker is the new hope, right? And so what does he do with this special power while they're all flying around in little tiny spaceships trying to kill this big space ball? And talk about this, right? He turns off his computer and he prays the torpedoes into the hole they have to go into to destroy the Death Star. He's supposed to be using a targeting computer. He turns it off. They say, "What happened, Luke?" He said, "I'm okay. I'm all right." And, Kenobi's talking to him. "Use the Force, Luke." And he does. And he closes his eyes But see, what does use the Force at that point? It's prayer. Now, it's not prayer to our God. It's meditative mind melding with this all-present energy thing, okay? But nonetheless, who is he? He is the one who has the supernatural power to bind and join with God so that the evil one can be destroyed. And he does it through submission, right? Not through strength, but through weakness, through letting go. Christ is there. There's a lot of Jesus there, right? Even though he doesn't die in the process.
So, kind of to wrap this up, as you have a unique vocation, not only are you my husband, but you also are a pastor. So you can speak to your Christian listeners from more of a spiritual father sense. Give us some just closing remarks about how to engage with this very popular part of our culture today.
Well, I'm going to borrow Chris Roseborough here of Pirate Christian Radio. When they train you to tell counterfeit money at a bank, they don't have you look at a lot of counterfeit money. They spend 4-6 hours with you sitting there looking at real money. And then they slip a counterfeit bill in and you can tell the difference. So the way that you learn to discern and keep your mind safe in the present age is not by never seeing counterfeit money because you're just going to hide from it. It's never going to show up. That's the way to get taken by the bill, right? It is to know what you believe and why you believe it in its authenticity, so strong, so committed, so deeply, not just as ideas, but as who you are. That when you then are out in the world, and whatever the world throws you, whether it's a movie or whether it puts you in a concentration camp, you don't hide from it. Your mind is prepared for battle at that point. So that is, go to church, go to Bible study, listen to theological. I mean, we're preaching to the choir here. If they're listening to this show, listening to me at this length, that you're doing this already. Well, keep doing that. Fill yourself up with it. And then the second thing would be, particularly with media, learn to believe that there's always a message there. Just get that assumption worked into you that all entertainment is preaching. That's okay. But don't assume that it isn't moving you. You should assume that if you don't know how it's moving you and you just don't know how. So instead, come back at it. Ask the questions. Love the story for the story and ask why. And then strive to find your counterpoint. 10 Commandments, Creed, Lord's Prayer, basic stuff. Why did I not like this? Why did I love this? That's about all there is to it.
So as an end, as a close, final close, I have, I don't know that I have 15 because I never got the sheet from you.
Oh.
But I do have a few fun 15 questions of my own.
I can give you the sheet if you want it, but if you want to do your
fantastic.
fun 15, do you want to do your fun 15 instead?
Well, I have a few, so we can do some of them.
This is hardly fast if we do it, but that's all right.
The fun 15 are just real off the cuff kind of questions, answers. You don't need to spend a long time answering. Mm-hmm. Just what comes to mind first, give us your answer. And it helps us, the listeners, to get to know you a little bit better. My first question is, what is your morning ritual?
So are you doing my questions now?
They'll be mixed in.
They're going to be mixed in. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I like the morning ritual ones. That was one that I had.
My morning ritual is try not to hit snooze, but usually hit snooze. Get into the bathroom, get water on my face. That helps a lot. Do the other bathroom stuff. I always have to get my hair done pretty fast because I'm going to be on the radio, on TV within 45 minutes or so. So I have to kind of make myself look good, put some clothes on real fast, crawl out into the kitchen, fill up a 32-ounce bottle of water, drink the entire thing, whether as by itself or mixed with some form of protein and vegetable shake. Protein and vegetable shake usually is a tablespoon of collagen, a tablespoon of hemp protein, a tablespoon of cinnamon, a dose of a organic green powder that I buy. I feel like I'm leaving one thing out. Sometimes I'll put in a tablespoon of matcha green tea in there as well, which has a nice flavor, and then add a solid lunch portion of lettuce, blend that thing to death, drink it with my vitamins. At that point, I'm making my my bulletproof coffee, although I've been leaning toward tea, bulletproofing tea. So that's a little bit of coconut oil, some butter, a little bit of stevia, and blend that thing up into a nice froth. And from there, I'm walking back into this room, the office study/studio, turn on the computer, and I'm trying to put together the broadcast information for both the radio and the Facebook stream. And 8 a.m., gotta go. It's go time. Doesn't matter how I feel at 7:58. I better be smiling and saying good morning, universe, in a few minutes. So that's most of it. I don't think there's much else I usually get to fit in that time period, but I do find routine to be tremendously helpful. Like that is every day. Those things happen, with rare exception.
If money were not an issue, what car would you buy?
Oh, that's a fun question. And I have two answers. So, because it was. This is like my Star Wars boyhood. I love Toyota Tacomas, jacked up, big tires, not too big, but big enough, just a little high up. King cab, but no backside, right? Open bed. It's just beautiful.
What color?
White's just so easy to take care of. But I have a different answer now. I'd buy a Tesla.
Really?
In a heartbeat.
Huh.
Why? I would. They're fantastic cars. I haven't driven one yet, but I want to.
I was going to say.
I have never heard someone who owns a Tesla say, yeah, I'm not so sure about this thing. They all rave about it.
Huh.
Rave.
So I know you're a minimalist.
Mm.
And what is your goal as a minimalist? Why are you a minimalist?
I'm an aspiring minimalist.
No, you can call yourself, I just found this out
Okay.
yesterday. You can call yourself a minimalist if you desire minimalism.
Mm.
Now, minimalism does not mean that you live in a room with nothing on the walls and all white furniture and only, a pen and piece of paper. It means you have a desire to have everything you own be an object that brings you joy.
Value, right?
Or value.
My goal is freedom. This gets to David Allen getting things done more than to minimalism. But if I have piles of paper on my desk, every time I see them, I expend energy either trying to figure out what they are or trying to keep what it is out of my head so I don't feel guilty about not having done it yet. And I want the freedom to not waste that energy and that time. I want to be able to do the thing that I think is worth doing right now. So we're just talking paper at this point, right? And managing information. But I found with minimalism that the same thing applies. The more stuff that I have that I just have, the more it steals my, I don't want to, soul's wrong. I don't mean like in a Christian sense, soul, right? But it steals my juju, right? It steals the energy to do what you want to do. It weighs you down. The marvelous Everbook that Brian and I are working on, but he sent me this version that he put coconut oil on it to try to make the leather work better, and we can't get the coconut oil off now, and it's been sitting here, and like 3 people in my family have been trying in different ways, right? Every time I walk by that thing, my heart just sinks. Not because I know I have to throw it away. I know that he told me to throw it away, but I don't want to. I don't want to give up on it. But see, that's I don't want to sound like a mystic, but that negative energy is not negative energy I need to have. I could instead just walk out a clean room and then go sit with my kids, right? And so that's my goal, is just the freedom of mind, freedom of conscience, freedom of mobility as well. I don't really want us to move every year the rest of our lives, but I don't know what this future holds in this country, and I want to be able to move if I have to. I want to be able to move fast. And that doesn't mean we're going to be able to take everything, but I just as soon not have to leave stuff, right? So that's some of it. Freedom to travel in retirement, as you and I have talked about. So if we ever get there.
I don't know if you can do this, but do you have a favorite hymn? Because it seems like every hymn you pull out, you're like, this is my favorite.
It's two. There's two. Christ Jesus lay in death-strung bands for our offenses given. Now at God's right hand he stands and brings us life from heaven. Therefore let us, as a grateful be, and sing to God right thankfully loud songs of Alleluia. It was a strange and dreadful strife when life and death contended. The victory remained with life, the reign of death was ended. It's just so good. Sing my tongue the glorious battle. Sing the ending of the fray. Tell how Christ, the world's Redeemer, as a victim won the day. It's, that'd be the other one. Now my tongue the mystery telling is pretty good too. It was funny. On Sunday at 10:30 service, or late service, we didn't have the choir there. They were at the early service. So, it took away some of the best singers in the congregation. So singing during communion was not as strong as it has been or could be in the past. And I felt kind of bad because it seemed like the first song I thought it was a well-known one, but maybe it wasn't. But then the second song was The Tree of Life. And I was stunned at how much of it I knew as I'm sitting up there just singing it while, in between delivery. And it's not fair to ask a pastor that question. Like, I don't know how it is that we just, because it's not like I sit down and try to memorize these things, but they have just over time and use become part of my mind. And it's a great gift, great asset to the church. I wish, well, I won't, I'll tell you this later. I wish that it was more of our culture as Lutherans to not just have organs, but to know hymns.
Yeah.
To know them.
That was pretty impressive. I have to say, I was not expecting you to quote the hymn.
I might have missed a word here or there.
If you found out you have 5 more months of existence, whatever that means, would you change what you're doing? Would you continue doing? What would you do? What would your focus
That's a
be?
question I have asked myself, not with that. Not quite with the 5-month thing, but I've asked myself that over the last couple of years. And I'm really thankful that as you ask it now, my first thought was, I'm going to cry. Jeez. I'd do exactly what I'm doing. I would give everything I could to ensuring that St. Paul Lutheran Church walks through the door it needs to walk through right now. I mean, it'd be tempting to be like, well, I'll go travel now. But it's like, no. I'm going to walk them through this door because it's their future and it's good. It's good for Rockford. It's good for Lutheranism. And if you're just out there listening, you don't know, that those are big words and it maybe doesn't mean much, but for the people here at St. Paul, I think they know exactly what I mean. And, the only exception to that is whether or not I'd be doing, daily morning radio. If I only had 5 months left, I think I'd say, hey, Sean Linnell, you can do this. I only got a little time left. I want to write a little more before I go. I want to put some stuff down that won't go away. So that would be there. But the rest of it, as it is, I've been very grateful. The last 6 months, writing has been something I've been able to just strong arm myself into scheduling in such a way that it's happened and it's happening and it's going to keep happening. A lot of study to try to become a professional on that and not only write when I feel like writing. The whole conversation with Katie Sherman was about that. So very grateful for that. Perhaps I would be a little better, strive a little harder to not push the long day and just come home and sit with the kids. And I think every father says that age 40.
So, what is your favorite way to celebrate? Something great happens.
Beer? Or margaritas. I'm not kidding. Like, my love. Cruddy white queso cheese dip and a bad margarita at a cheap Mexican restaurant. That is heaven to me. I adore that. And I love a good IPA. Now, aside from that, to celebrate, for me, it's to do very little. I mean, to me, when I think about what is celebration, it's a beer in hand on a sunny afternoon with the grill and a fire pit maybe, and a couple of close friends, cigars afterwards, just talking. I'm very blessed here that we've got a number of good theologians in the congregation, but Aaron Wolf and Michael Woolery are both elders in the congregation, and we try about once a month to meet at 4:30 or 5 and drink a couple of beers and just talk about life and theology, and that is a celebration to me. I'm not good at I'm not good at really celebrating when it comes to like do a job well done and then find a way to feel good about it yourself, right? Be glad of your. Tim Ferriss talks about this too. Like, so I am going to, in 3 days, send a manuscript to Concordia Publishing House.
That's worth celebrating.
And I will not do anything to say to myself, good job, Jonathan. Or Echo came out and I was happy about it, but it wasn't like I sat back and thought, well, let's just enjoy this. I was the day of, I'm like, okay, what's next? Mm-hmm. And so I'm not good at that. And I'm not sure that's healthy. That is what it is.
All right. How much time do we have?
We got as much as you want. Let's do this. This is fun.
Okay, cool.
It's already a long episode, and they get their money's worth this time.
Well, let's go for yours. How do you measure success at the end of the day?
I don't. I measure it at the end of the week, and it's based on my lists. And it's how much of my lists are not on my lists anymore. I don't think that's healthy either. I think it's healthy that I have lists and try to get the list done. I don't think that it's healthy that that's how I tell myself whether or not I'm a good human or a valuable human, useful to the family or to the world. But I'm driven by it too. So it's like, how do you can you change your core? I will say that since I learned to acknowledge that if you're an artist or a writer or whatever, musician, that finding a way to do it every day, regardless of how good it might be, you will feel better about yourself. There's no question that I feel better about my day if I have written, not an email, but like sat down and crafted. No question. There's a difference in the day. But at the same time, I eat dinner with my family almost every night. I get a hug from my kids every day, roll around on the ground with a couple of them. My wife and I are still married. So there's not a night that I think I'm a failure either. And those are those reasons, right? The rest of it I'm trying. But yeah.
Who is the most influential church father for you? For you personally?
Yeah, Sasa. Hermann Sasa. German theologian under the Nazi regime, taught at a university, not a Nazi, spoke out against them. Doesn't get killed. Could have been, but was protected, was shielded by a administrator there that kind of politically maneuvered so that he didn't end up getting sent off like Bonhoeffer did. Ends up not having a home in the unified Reformed churches in Germany after that because he can't commune with any of them. So he ends up going to Australia and of his life. And man, he's such a cross bearer because even there, his son becomes Roman Catholic, I believe, and his legacy in Australia hasn't necessarily been politically good for the the sake of Australian Lutheranism. And there's an episode where I interview Pastor Stephen Vanderhook about some of that and the issues they're having with liberalism, because they joined two church bodies, and it probably shouldn't have happened, but Sasa was instrumental in that. So all this sad, right, and wrong. But if reading his Lonely Way series has made me the theologian I am in many ways. Now, is he really a church father? 60 years ago, 70 years ago.
What about his lonely way made you who you have become as a theologian? Is it his way to express himself? Is it his way of viewing different pieces of Lutheranism that we...
His confidence based on conviction that the word and the sacraments of Jesus are enough for the church in any age. We don't have Nazis marching in the street in this country, no matter what the social justice warriors tell you. And so if he could stand there in that and see the collapse that was happening there and say, you know what the answer is, guys? We need to take the Lord's Supper more seriously. Well, then I can stand here and say it now. So I'm inspired by that. We don't face near the catastrophe that he faced. And he gave the good witness of the right thing to say. And we can say the same thing now. So I'm inspired to that, to see to believe that the right practice of the Lord's Supper is the heartbeat of the Christian church through history. So if we want the Christian church to be strong in America, we need a strong heartbeat. To teach toward that, to push toward that, to repent in my own life toward that. And so I think, to be fair though, so Church Father, I would say, I'm not steeped in the actual Church Fathers. I've got tidbits here, but Luther in the Confessions has been a father to me. I have reread Small Code Articles and Large Catechism more than any other portion of the Confessions. So very formative there.
Is there a book that you have read over and over and over again in your life?
Other
than the Bible, the Confessions, the Small Catechism?
I would say Lord of the Rings, although it's probably only been 3 times. I've read Dune about 5 times. Dune is a phenomenal sci-fi book. I think the book I've read more than any other book is Getting Things Done by David Allen. I've reread it once a year for about 6 or 7 years now. It's always valuable. It always inspires me to try harder, to just do a little better at getting through the weeds and finding the valuable things to do. I've now read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek twice, which surprises me because it sounds like this scam book, but it's got some real great principles for life decisions in there. But yeah, getting things done.
If your life were a movie, what would the theme song be?
Ooh, well, that's fun.
If we could look it up real quick, we could play it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird because I could answer this a lot of different ways, but it would be a mixed blend of Friends with the Monster by Eminem and Coming Home, Puff Daddy. Mm-hmm. Neither of whom are my favorite artists at all, but got the monster in my head. I got the person who I am, fight him every day. And that line about coming home, they've forgiven my mistakes, right? That my family's here for me. Christianity's here for me. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. He shouts it. He's singing about the death of his friend, right? I think he's singing about the death of Biggie, which I don't know if you know what the East Coast rappers, Notorious B.I.G. was shot in years back, and Puff Daddy was part of that group. He's been accused of being involved in conspiracy around all this stuff. And the song he's rapping about, I think, if I understand it right, he's rapping about going back to the East Coast, reestablishing his roots, trying to get over the guilt of not being able to stop his friend from getting killed, and yet accepting where he is, that he's got kids that aren't the daughters of his wife, and but I still got people I'm committed to. As bad as the past might be, forgiveness and the present and home is something to stand on for tomorrow. So there's grace in that.
You mentioned Lord of the Rings. In Lord of the Rings, which character would you most closely associate with?
Mary. Sadly. Yeah. I want to say Pippin because he's funnier.
Unpack that one.
I mean,
I was not expecting you to say that.
Look, who doesn't want to be Aragorn? Gandalf's a boss. Frodo's great, but it's hard to really envision yourself as the guy who ends up becoming evil and like has to have his finger bitten off for the world to get saved, right? No one really aspires to be that. And then you got Sam, who's the actual hero, Christ figure, sacrificial giver, always doing what's good, saves Frodo. Sam's too good. I'm not Sam. And I'm not Aragorn. I mean, yeah, sure. But like I want to be. Nice big sword, swing it, yay. But see, Pippin and Merry, they're these other hobbits that are just along for the ride. And they each have their own personality. And Pippin, Peregrine Took, is it's kind of a goof, a little bit of a joker. I'd like to kind of be him because he's fun. Merry's just this serious, committed guy who's, I think he's the one who says to Frodo when Frodo tries to go off on his own, he says, we're not leaving you, Frodo. We're here all the way, and we meant it. And he doesn't really have much to offer besides that. He ends up becoming a shield bearer of the Riders of Rohan, and is there as part of the takedown of the King of the Nazgul with Éowyn, the woman, this guy who's been prophesied that no hand of man shall harm him. Well, Merry stabs him with a dagger. He's not a man. And then Éowyn finishes it. But he's right there as well. But he's not. It's not like I want to be him. It's more that like if I were to ask, what character am I most like? It's him. That just enough skill to be present and help. But I'm not Aragorn. I wish I was, but
it's funny that you mentioned him. As I think about it, there are so many characters, and I don't even know all the names, so I can't be like, well, what about this guy?
Yeah.
And what about that girl?
Well, I love. I'm gonna lose his name. Boromir's brother. Who ends up marrying Éowyn?
Right, and I was thinking about him, and I sorry.
Well, he's an unsung. He's the unsung hero who again recognizes I'm not Aragorn, I never will be, but I can do what's right here now, and yeah, I aspire to that.
I think about Aragorn, and I think, what about you isn't Aragorn? And I can't really put my...
Well, thank you, honey. On my own podcast. I love it. I paid her to say that.
I mean, what is it about him that you're like, oh no, that's not me? I know you say you want to be, but is there one characteristic about him? Because I can't really find anything. Initially you're introduced to him, and he's a loner, and yet he's secretive, and
so I'm a loner and I'm secretive.
I met you and you were all by yourself and not in the group, and he comes to be a very valuable member of the team, and yet he never really joins the team. You can't just lump him together with them.
That's interesting.
But he's extremely valuable.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean he's the king. He's more than valuable, but he's doing his own thing too.
But he never lords it over them.
No.
He's never like, well, hey, give me that coney stew because I'm the king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know that I could say that I would demand your coney stew, but I am not that sacrificial. Aragorn is the same thing with Sam. Like they're the real good guys because they are they're that good. And it's not that Merry is like more evil, but he's just not that good.
He's a hobbit, but he's more human.
He's not a hero.
Mm.
I'm not a hero. I'm not. I want to be. I love hero stories. I'm not. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay being the good guy in the support role.
The one who holds the sword and swings it when nobody else can.
Yeah.
You said Merry is the one who stabs the guy who couldn't be.
He has no choice, so he pulls the sword out and sticks it up. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so it's not like I'm a man of courage. Aragorn takes the paths of the dead to go to his birthright as king, right?
I understand he is the Christ figure. So, essentially being like, yeah, I'm Aragorn. You'd be like, hello, I am Christ.
But no, it's not just about that. It's about he has a courage that is, he seeks out the enemy. He seeks out, he actually takes the Palantir Stone and looks into Sauron's eyes to reveal himself, and then goes to the gates, right? And Merry goes along with him to the gates. But that courage to do that on your own, I envision myself more as Merry, who's like, yeah, I'll ride with you. I don't know. It's a leadership question, I guess.
Sure.
I'd love to be that leader. I'm not sure I am. I've never shown that I am in terms of life. My family follows me. But that's what I can't get his name again now. They are yelling at us about this name, Boromir's brother.
I should just
Faramir.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Faramir, a good man. That's enough for me. I don't need to be king.
What is? Let's see. I found it and I lost it. In Lutheranism, well, no, not in Lutheranism. What do you believe that most Lutherans do not? I find this to be a very fascinating question.
Mm-hmm. What I've enjoyed in asking it of people is how off the wall the answers are. I mean, it really pulls some stuff out. That it can work, that church organization, church life doesn't have to be a ramshackle, collapsed, half-assed thing, that liturgy doesn't have to be boring, that church doesn't have to be painful and dull, that sermons don't have to be hard to listen to, and that most of that has nothing to do with your doctrine, and it's everything to do with how willing you are to study and apply the first article, which means organization, speaking, those kinds of things, time management, that this is valuable, minimalism, mindfulness. I mean, those are all just, for me, things that it's been, that the world was designed to work, and while it is certainly sinful and filled with thorns and thistles, it still works. So if the pagans can figure out how to run a corporation so that they get their mission done, we can too. But that means we have to be able to look at what we're doing and question it, on the one hand. And in my experience, the biggest hindrance to that is we actually don't believe it can be done. I've been told churches are just dysfunctional. It's just the way it is. And I don't believe that. But it does require not just the first article stuff. I believe this. I'm trying to be the pastor who does this here. It means that the pastor isn't just teaching doctrine as ideas. He's calling this stuff out on the ground in your face. He's saying right here, right now, this Bible is applying to us as a group. We're not acting this way, or we have to make this kind of... So for the St. Paul example, living in the red, losing money that was given not for the purpose of annual budget, borrowing that from ourselves for 10 years, without any real goal or plan or ability to pay it back, that's sin. To say, well, let's just dig deeper. God can give us enough if we just no, that's unbelief. You belief would say that I don't steal, right, or that I manage my household well. And for whatever reason, this is not a St. Paul thing. This is again a Missouri Synod culture thing. We've managed to just kind of say hands off on that. Like, oh, it's all falling apart. Oh well. We'll do a program or something.
You mentioned the
we should call it out.
Have a little bit more faith, and God will, or not have a little bit more faith, but well, if we just pray about this, God will then reveal to us the path. We can just sit in our little circle, and God will guide us. Where did that come from?
The devil.
It doesn't. Is it traceable from some heresy that seeped into? Because it doesn't seem.
It's mysticism. I mean, this is Luther out of Small Coat Articles. It is enthusiasm, which clings to the flesh. It is the source of all heresies, including Mohammedanism and the papacy, which is the idea that God speaks to us outside of His Word, and that there's more than what His Word has given us, that we're supposed to be learning from Him. So when I say you should do time management, it's not because God has like new revelation to give you in time management. He has written time into the world. And so you can study what He wrote there and how getting things done works and learn to do it better according to the rules He's built. But when we're talking about, the future of results of money being given to the church, He's got nothing more to reveal to us. You got your pocketbook, you got your budget. Make a match. If you can't do one, do the other. You either cut or you give more. And then realistically, when you study it, you can only increase congregational giving so much every year, no matter how hard you try. But if you do it over 10 or 15 years, you can really do something with that. Well, so again, that's what we don't believe. Most churches in the Missouri Synod do not do a stewardship emphasis every year, asking the congregation every year to take a small step up. If they did, they'd have a lot fewer money problems. But instead, they sit there for 30 years and just wonder where the money went. And they never talk about it, right? And they're afraid to talk about it.
Well, I think a lot of people assume that the money is going to come from growth. So they put their focus on whatever quote-unquote evangelism is.
Right. But it gets back
Easter egg hunts and making the community come to you.
It gets back to stewardship, though. I mean, it is stewardship not just of money, but of time and of lives. So I guess maybe to answer that question a different way, what do I believe that most Lutherans don't believe is that the church exists to steward the lives of the Christians. And the pastor's job is to steward the lives of the Christians by means of the Word of God, and that it does work when you use the Word of God to do it, and when you believe the first article is real. It's not without sin. It's not perfect. But it doesn't have to be the catastrophe of organization and failure at mission that the Missouri Synod at least looks like. I got a caveat real fast. I'm sorry. I am not trying to say that the guys who are overseas right now that have been sent in the last 10 years, we have a lot of pastors that have gone overseas in the last 10 years. We've got a couple guys in cities trying to do something right now. I'm not trying to call them out. But the fact that this is only like the last 10 years we're doing this, see, that's the thing. Why is it that we only have 4 sent missionaries to the cities in the United States when we have these massive cities, right? Why is it that we don't... In Philadelphia, there is no Missouri Synod Church in downtown Philadelphia. Why is that? Right? That kind of thing. I'm not trying to call out the guys who are...
Is there one in downtown Chicago?
I think Chicago's big, and yes and no, but no, not a new one.
Yeah.
There's no.
I mean, I'm trying to think of all the major cities. New York City.
There is the Church for All Nations in Manhattan. I don't know if I...
Church for All Nations.
It's the name of the...
Oh, it's LCMS.
It's LCMS. Oh, okay. I don't know that I would ever worship there myself, but it's there. So kudos for trying.
Okay, so we have New York, San Francisco.
Yeah, I don't know.
Has one still?
Yeah, there's a church there.
There was.
I don't know that it's in the downtown area.
And San Diego, we know, has one. Grace
Yep.
is there.
Yep. L.A. I mean, even if we have a church there.
But Philadelphia and Chicago are pretty big cities.
Even if we have a church there. These are cities of millions upon millions of people. And like, you got one church there?
Right.
What? Right? So I don't want to call out as if these guys that are overseas aren't trying to do mission right now, aren't working, but my point is that we look at what our funding actually is and the amount of impact we've been able to have on mission as congregations and as a church body. I think we can do a lot better.
Totally changing the subject. If you could get a dog, what kind of dog would you get and what would you name it?
Really? Like I'm allowed to say what, you know what I'm going to say.
Well,
I get a collie and his name would be Dog Meat.
Oh, I didn't know it was going to be a collie though. I thought you were going to get a German Shepherd.
No, if I get any dog, I know my wife will let me get a German Shepherd if we ever get a dog, but she won't let me get a collie. And so I've become okay with a German Shepherd.
Why don't I want a collie?
They're too active and they're big.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Oh.
I like miniature collies too, but they're even more active.
If you said we were going to go get a dog, I would be so excited.
Got to talk to the landlord, my friend. But his name would be Dog Meat in tribute to Fallout 4.
Who is your favorite fictional antagonist?
It's Thanos now, I guess.
Why?
I aspire to have his conviction, to stand against the whole world when they're telling me I'm wrong, and to know the truth, and to know it's so true and so right that I won't let anything get in my way, that I would sacrifice all for the greater good. I love that about him. I mean, he's wrong, but I want that will. I want that conviction, because the world does hate what we have to say as Christians.
See, this is why I wanted you to do these interviews or these commentaries on pop culture, is because, see, you have this way of taking something that maybe your average, wonderfully pious Lutheran in the pew, Christian in the pew would see as evil and not want to touch with a 9-foot pole. And you have a way of saying, but look at it through virtue, through the honor of what he is and who he is. And yeah, that's valuable. I like to see your side of things.
I also like how, because he is wrong, he puts the lie to most of liberal Western society, because he is only doing what their philosophy says. If you believe in any way that the world is facing overpopulation and climate change, Thanos' answer is the answer. You kill half the people. That's where you go. And we're already doing it with the babies, right? Abortion. But, and everybody who watches that movie sees him doing this and says, no, you can't do that. That's evil. Yep, you're right. It's evil. So I love it, because he puts the lie to people who are doing this on a lesser level. And I hope that because it's seen as evil there, it acts as a boundary or a barrier. It curbs the society itself. The fact that was a story that was told when it was told hopefully bodes well for our society, that we still think that's evil. Because technically most people, if you talk with them about their spirituality, they don't think that's evil. They just haven't done the math.
What is the best tool you have ever purchased for your day-to-day life?
The Uniball Signo Micro 307 black ballpoint pen. It's the only one I buy, and I love it. I did not purchase my Everbook cover as an Everbook cover. I purchased it as a journal, but it's become pretty useful. If you haven't heard about the Everbook stuff, I'll try to put a show note link about it. It's a thing Brian Wolfmuller and I are working on. There's a website, but you can see more about it there. But yeah, this pen, I think. MacBook's pretty important.
What dusty corner of theology are you obsessed with?
First article. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. There's a design. There's a design, and we can study it. We can study it better than the pagans can because we believe it's there. They don't believe it's there. They think it's all accident. There's a design.
I find it interesting that you say that that's a dusty corner because we speak that every Sunday.
Oh, yeah. No one pays attention to what they say in the creed. Are you kidding me?
So unpack why do you find it to be a dusty corner?
It's that bit when I was saying before that we don't believe things can work. At the moment, you don't maybe know this, but at the moment, there has been about a 3 or 4 year debate in online Lutheranism over the third use of the law. So you got people lined up on both sides yelling at each other about whether or not there's a third use of the law. And the idea is like, it's basically an argument over sermon structure.
So for the listener and for myself as well, explain what do they mean by third use of the law?
So the confessions state that God uses the law in 3 ways: to
Right.
curb, to reveal or mirror your sin, and to guide you.
So they're talking about the
The
guide.
guide. And it's basically an argument over sermon structure, which is, should you end your sermon by exhorting? Because you need to preach sin first, and then you preach Jesus, and then do you stop there, or do you exhort people now to try harder at the end? And I'm being very straw-manny about this and painting with a super broad brush. But we're in this extended debate, again, over not whether or not Christians need law in their life, but this rather esoteric description of a way that God uses the law in our lives. And I think it's exactly what the devil would have us do, rather than actually studying the law in our lives, which is what the first article is. That the existence of creation has not gone away just because we're redeemed. We still live here. We're in it, but we're not of it, but we're still in it. The fact that we're arguing over whether or not we use the law in a certain way means we're not studying how to act in this life. So I think it's incredibly dusty. I think if we had a strong first article theology, you would have no time to argue about the third use of the law, except with those who actually say there is no law, which is what the whole thing is designed for in the Confessions, is against the antinomians, who say, no, the law is gone entirely, which only the most liberal, abortion, women's ordination, that's antinomianism, not I don't preach exhortation in my sermons. I mean, I think you're a fool if you don't, but I think you're a fool if you have the same sermon structure every week. I think you're a fool if you're not saying what the scriptures say and are actually writing your sermons out as if you could preach the word of God without just saying what the scriptures say. And that I'm speaking way broadly there again, but there's so much effort given to sermon prep. And then you go and you listen and you hear everything but the Bible. And it's like, well, you worked really hard on that. There was some truth in there, but like, where was the scriptures? Tangent and ramble there a little bit. I think that we would not be having this debate about sermon structure as law gospel because we wouldn't have time. We'd be so busy doing other good things. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
So you are going to be deposited into a wilderness.
Okay.
For 30 days.
Yikes.
You have a backpack.
Mm-hmm.
It can carry 30, 40 pounds. That's not a huge backpack. What do you take with you?
I would stuff Bear Grylls into the backpack, even though he's the guy who can survive in the wilderness on anything, right? So he would just be in the backpack.
He would be your backpack.
Yes. Yes. I don't want the backpack. I want Bear Grylls.
Right.
30 days in the wilderness. I wouldn't even know where to begin. So I would want the, I believe it's either like a copy of the Art of Manliness or the Boy Scouts Survival Guide. I would need a Crocodile Dundee style large Bowie knife of some kind. Matches, lighter matches, some sort of tinder / kindling as well. That would be useful.
So I just learned
30 cans of sardines.
Oh, sorry.
30 cans of sardines, a canteen, and a rain slick, right? Rain slick. Warm clothing if I'm not already wearing it. 5 pairs of socks. First aid kit. Like Band-Aids. Now, a more fun question would be,
for your fun 15.
There's a zombie apocalypse. What do you need? And the answer is a green herb and a shotgun and a baseball bat.
Are you going to unpack that one? It's inside joke.
There was a marvelous video game series called Resident Evil that became less marvelous the further it went, but you didn't want to go anywhere without a green herb because it heals you. And then you learn pretty quickly that while a long-range rifle is really cool for sniping, if you're in a hallway with zombies, you want a shotgun or a baseball bat. That's what you want. Just wide. So.
And let's see.
I interrupted your follow-up to my my backpack.
That's right. I was just going to tell you that I learned recently that you can use dryer lint.
Oh.
It's extremely flammable for tinder. Who knew, right? If you could lead a 2-week boot camp for young men the summer before college, what would it look like?
This question has shifted a little bit since I've got a couple answers from other guys that really made me think about it. But it would focus heavily on, what do you call it? Fire hose style reading. So they'd basically be reading a book a day, and that'd be their morning. It's like you get up, you read this book, and you'd be done by lunch. And then lunchtime, we would have like a 2-hour on that. And if money's the limit or sky's the limit with money, I'm bringing in the author, or at the very least, there's some really high quality, engaging teachers that are doing a 2-hour intensive on that book. And we'd be doing everything from getting things done, like how to do time management, to, rise and fall of Western civilization, to, how to prepare to stand up against the brainwashing they're going to throw you at college with their sensitivity training and all that kind of stuff. And then, so this is added now thanks to the other guys. And then in the afternoon, we'd have some sort of heavy sport thing, maybe different every day, maybe the same. I don't know. And at the same time, built around it somehow. This would be ideal. That it's like on a farm, so the guys would all have to work together to prepare all meals. You wouldn't have to kill all the food, but you're doing all the work as well, and just kind of full on boot camp platoon the thing. But really, with the intensive, the idea would be to get their minds ready for war. War of words.
What is the most important failure in your life?
There's so many. Taking the call to KFUO. It's not KFUO's fault. Nothing to do with them. I've kind of spoken about this before. And you know, well, from the first call on, with that disaster of a mission plant, unfunded, unsupported thing in middle of nowhere, New Jersey, I was walking wounded, stumbling, trying to find a space to heal. And as a result, I don't think, while every call that I took, I did have a mental, rational reason for saying I'm going to, I'm not running from. So it wasn't as though I never took a call to somewhere for good reason. But as I look back, if I'm honest with myself, I was running from every time. And that culminated in the KFUO call and leaving North Dakota. And when I realized that at KFUO, and it was not being able to preach and teach regularly that made me realize it. That shook me to my core. That was wrong. It's not like you're wrong if you take a call to KFUO, and people can do that, right? I was wrong.
I think it's interesting that you say that you couldn't preach and teach regularly, because a lot of people would look at that call and they'd say, you were preaching and teaching every day.
Yeah.
Is it maybe more preaching and teaching to a family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's something organic about what you're sent to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, at least, that I need. I don't know if I were in a classroom, if it'd be different. If I was a prof, which I don't think I ever will be, if it would be that would give me enough of that. Marge. I don't know how old Marge is. Is she 100 yet?
I don't know.
Marge, goes to the late service, and she's usually the one that we have to commune in the pew. Sometimes there's a few more, but she's there every week. She can't hear me for nothing. I don't know if she's heard a sermon I preached yet, but she's there to get the Lord's Supper. And I give it to her. And she waits for me. The handshake line is in one direction, and she has to go a different way with her walker, and she sits there and waits for me until I'm done with everybody else, and she's standing there waiting to shake my hand. I mean, that's not true. None of that is Christianity. The Lord's Supper part's very much Christianity, but you don't get that in the radio. And it's not like I'm really good at that or even love it, but there's something my soul needs as a pastor that is a answer to a piece of. I don't know.
You said you were the walking wounded, and I wonder if perhaps you weren't necessarily from call to call running specifically from the congregation or the situations that you experienced in each previous call, or if perhaps you were just never allowed the chance to heal from the initial shock.
That's very likely.
Of your first call.
There's also this fact that I finally was diagnosed with sleep apnea midway through the KF, and like suddenly it was my ability to endure hatred has grown tenfold, or not even hatred, like a remark, right? So there's that. But for me, no, KFUO though, in some ways it was like, each one of those calls was, I was moving toward something higher on the ladder in my own mind. And the one away from Naperville wasn't quite that. But even as I took it, I was thinking, well, this is only for 5 years. And that, excuse me, listener, that asshole of a man that I am, to think that. And that to get the KFUO call, and I did wrestle with it, but I also kind of knew I was going to go. Why? It's because I got a radio show. I've made it now. And then when when I got there, and somehow an existential crisis occurred in my soul where I just realized that everything I thought I was climbing toward was only my own ego and that there was nothing there. That's the most valuable thing I've ever learned as an adult male. Doesn't mean I'll never forget it, but everything that I am able to currently do, whether for KFUO or for St. Paul or writing, everything is better because of that failure.
I don't even know how to follow that.
No?
But I can do this one. What is the most important first article truth you see you see most people ignoring?
See me pushing the first article theology, yeah, in my questions. Nutrition. I don't know if I want to betray my tinfoil hat on where that is in my mind, but I think it doesn't take, well, the fact that when I went from 200 pounds to 170 pounds, which is still 10 pounds above my target weight and still technically obese on the doctor scale, people were asking me if I was sick because we're just used to everyone not looking healthy. And we think healthy is sick now. Just take a look around at the grocery store, at the restaurants, at the children who the next generation is. I was really healthy and athletic until I turned 23. So I don't know what's going to happen to the kid who's just like me, who's been fed on nothing but junk and is already battling weight. But I do know that what we eat, the way that I went from 225 actually down to this morning I'm 175. I'd still like to get down another 10 pounds. I do know that I've done it without exercise. It has exclusively been deciding what to eat and what not to eat, studying it, like reading up on what causes this, trying a couple of diets, but learning continuously in this, not starving myself, but realizing that there are certain foods that maybe we think we've been told are healthy for us, which aren't. And certainly aren't in the portions or with the chemicals that we've added to them. The story of Sean, I can't think of his name now.
Steven,
the model health guy, and his complete health breakdown in the 20s, that he was just turned around by basically stopped eating boxed food. Stop eating boxed food. I mean, that's a good start right there. So that, to me, that it's just something that, and I look at LCMS pastors too, and I don't want to judge these guys as if they're evil. This isn't about being evil. We were all raised in this. We've been sold this. You want to talk about a military industrial complex? How about the boxed food industrial complex? It's not been good for us, and I'm not saying you got to be a lettuce Nazi or anything like that. But I think it's something we would do well to start paying attention to, because you don't have to be. I did not have to be 225 pounds. It was not in my genes, just foreordained, even though every male in my family had this huge front belly on them. And I still got a little one I'm struggling with, but like it was going further, and it didn't have to be that way. And all it took was just a little bit of study. And then it. Are there times I'd like to eat more junk food? Yeah, of course there are. But it's not as hard as you think. And you don't got to go run marathons to do it.
Right. What major idea have you changed your mind about in the last few years?
Well, that one.
Yeah, I remember when you started on that trip, and I call it a trip, but it's more like a journey because it wasn't fast. It's been long and it's been winding and here and there. I went to Alaska to visit my sister for her wedding. And when I came back, it was like a whole new man had entered my home and claimed that he was my husband. And you were making the bed every day and you were cooking differently.
Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss podcast, long form, 3-hour long podcast, just like this one's going to be.
Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all right. This is it. This is what he did, and it works, and there's something to it. You really get deep when you go a little longer. And yeah, I can really thank Tim Ferriss for a lot of things in life, even though I disagree with quite a few things he says too. Something I changed my mind about. Now we're really going to go into Dangerland. Trump. Donald Trump. I didn't want Trump to be president. I didn't vote. I did not vote.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
We could have done a lot of extra work to be able to, it was during the move from North Dakota. Could have done a bunch of extra work to be able to vote in North Dakota. But see, I don't think our system's as good as people think it is. And so I knew my vote didn't matter in North Dakota, just like it doesn't matter in Illinois. And so North Dakota was going to vote Trump with or without me. And Missouri, I couldn't vote there. We didn't live there yet.
That was kind of fantastic. I mean, just fantastic as in, picture this. You're going to a high school basketball game because it's cold outside and that's what you do. You go to the sporting events that are inside when it's cold. And these kids start body surfing a cardboard cutout of Trump through the crowd.
But at the time, I would have said, this is silly. This is weird. I liked Rand Paul because he's a constitutionalist, small government. I thought that Ted Cruz was more well-spoken, more established. I thought that Trump was a liberal plant that the media was propping up as a way to, and they gave him so much free coverage at the time, and they spoke well of him because they wanted him to be the Republican nominee because they didn't want these other guys running against Hillary. So I thought he was just a stooge that was being used to destroy the opportunity for the Republicans to unseat Hillary, and that it was all manipulated. And then the election happens. I didn't think he was going to win either, and I was sad about that because and politics is politics. Abortion's a pretty important deal for me, and there's no question that Hillary was going to push that even further. And what I did not expect was for him to so consistently make some amazingly good policy decisions. He is, I mean, I don't like everything he's done. He's been the most pro-life president we've ever had. I mean, George Washington was probably more pro-life. It wasn't an issue, right? He has been so consistent. His approach to the judiciary has been so actually Republican. So if you don't like Republicans, that's fine. But he's actually been Republican, whereas previous Republican presidents were sort of like playing in the middle, trying to make everybody happy. The fact that he's been able to get North Korea to talk. This is a rogue state that's threatening to blow people with nuclear bombs all the time, and he's got the method. Now, does that mean that he's actually, in talking with them, going to help the people on the ground under this terrible socialist regime? No, not necessarily. But at the very least, we're not at like pointing our guns at each other anymore. In this like kind of not guns, pointing our bombs. They're still pointing their guns, pointing their bombs at each other. So the fact he's been able to do that, it's just stunned me how good a president he's been. And then what's really pushed me to acknowledge that is the fact that the media just will not be even remotely like level in like, this was good, this was bad. Like, it's all bad. When Molly Hemingway says the media for the last 2 years has been summed up as orange man bad, orange man bad. Like it's really kind of not radicalized, but pushed me to care a little bit more. Again, because the life issue matters, because the rise of socialism as a working theory for what our country should be is apparently really mattering to young people now. It really has changed my mind about his movement. And I mean, you don't follow all of this. So there have been multiple race hate crimes done by people with Make America Great Again hats on that the national media has publicized as soon as it was accused, that have been later shown to be hoaxes, faked. A African-American gay actor in the last 3 weeks paid 2 Nigerian extras from his show to pretend to beat him up and flee the country. And then he went to the police and accused of being 2 white males with MAGA hats on. And the media played that really loud, right? They're a little less quiet now that he's been charged with conspiracy to hoax. Charles Barkley made fun of him the other night. Said, America, if you're going to commit a crime, don't pay with a check.
Ha.
He paid with a personal check. Anyway, but that kind of crazy hate that's going on for his movement, I don't know. I at the very least, because I'm not pro-Trump. I'm not like I love the guy. I'm not going to put his bumper sticker on my car. But I have changed my mind. I'm willing to give him a little more benefit of the doubt because he's continually surprised me with actual policy decisions. I mean, people can argue, Republicans can argue about whether it's good or not to withdraw from Syria. But as a Rand Paul constitutionalist, stay home, don't go abroad, libertarian Republican that I am,
That's a long title.
It is, but he actually made a non-warmongering, non-military industrial complex move. Like wait, I guess I have to say thank you, Donald Trump. And I just keep finding myself in that situation now. But I am scared that we can't talk about these things. I'm afraid like this right now. Someone's now not listening because I said Trump. It's so vitriolic these days.
It is. Well, then, I guess we'll have to change the subject. What is your favorite Bible verse? And you can answer that one, and then I'll ask the follow-up.
It's too easy. There is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Romans 8:1.
And what is your favorite non-Bible quote?
I'm really partial to, I believe it's Cyprian. We want to stand upon the ruins of the world and not lie on the ground with those who have no hope. I'm also a fan of, I believe it's Vigor Mortalis. I think that's right. Game of Thrones. All men must die.
It's true. What is the one thing or something that you hope to instill in the next generation of Fisks that will continue after you've died, before Christ comes back?
Your heart beats the Lord's Supper. Both for you and your children, your family, your church. And that's grace. Because in Rome, it's not grace. No. You go to Rome, you lose grace. You go to the Protestants, you lose the heartbeat. You want them both.
And what do you say to the small child who has that desire for the Lord's Supper but is not confirmed?
The Lord will keep you in your baptism. I say it every week, multiple times to multiple kids. I mean, the child that wants to commune, I say...
I know that you were one of those children.
Yeah. I was,
growing up.
but at least, so I don't know. I don't know if I really was. I know I had said I wanted it, but I'm not so sure I knew what I was saying. What I say to my children is, we're working on making it so that you can commune as soon as you can. And time and reality don't always allow you to commune when you're ready. But ideally, congregations will increasingly recognize that making you wait until you've lost the faith is a bad idea, which is what we do with most 8th graders, right? So because they're checked out by that point. But it also, the Lord will keep you in your baptism. Your baptism is sufficient. When I did that 5-day fast, I did not commune that Sunday, even though I was present and even helped distribute. And maybe that was wrong of me to help distribute. I could understand that argument. But I did not commune, and I felt a little guilty for a moment. But then I remembered, no. There is no emergency communion.
Mm-hmm.
I know who my Redeemer is. I'm fasting today. Next week I'll commune again. It's actually kind of where the definition of fast comes from in Christian tradition, in a lot of ways. So,
do you think that there is a difference between, and I don't know, this may be too, well, I'll just ask it. Do you think there's a difference between when a girl versus a boy could cognitively be ready?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's definitely a difference in the way that they develop intellectually.
Right.
But that's in terms of expression. I'm not sure that's necessarily in terms of understanding. So our boy, he understands things even though he doesn't act on his understanding. Mm-hmm. Right? So I don't know.
And I have a hard time with that, I guess, is my, I think that I fall into the category of, well, the proof is in the pudding kind of mentality, like, show me your faith then.
Right.
And
well, because it is about maturity, and it's not just about knowledge. It is about understanding. And so if you are not prepared to reverence, right, to come to the table as a sinner who wants this bread to forgive me, then you're not ready. And it's hard to be ready like that when you can't pay attention for more than 15 seconds to anything.
Right. Well, and that's why I was curious, because I do notice a difference in a small boy's ability to pay attention and focus.
But that's our boy
girl.
too. See, and this is just it. Each child is individual, and so it could be any child at any time, depending on that child. And while boys and girls will have their leans, you're going to find a boy or a girl that's the exception of the rule as well. Mm-hmm. So it's really about, and this is the problem is we've adopted this American education model, which is not based on education, but is based on the assembly line and factories and preparing factory workers. We've taken that and put it into how we make disciples. With Sunday school, with classrooms, are all the same age, you move up no matter what. And confirmation, all the same age, you move up. It's like you're a car on an assembly line. But we're humans with minds and hearts and understandings and different backgrounds, different support at home, different teaching at home. So, what we need as church is to move toward a model of a more individually directed discipleship, which then, of course, involves the parents too. Is a broader thing. But that's my goal here, is to get to the point where you're confirmed when you're ready.
And I guess I got nervous personally because when you said we want to give them communion before they've checked out, which is typically the age of 14.
Somewhere in there.
8th grade.
Yeah.
And from watching my own children grow, I have noticed the girls just increasingly get more serious about their faith. And I've watched my son go through this kind of ebb and flow. Mm-hmm. When he was 5, he was really into it. now he's having more trouble at 7 to pay attention. So is it like uh-oh, we lost him already? Or as a 7-year-old boy, then going into the 10-year-old phase, do you become more serious and focused
My
again?
experience in teaching 5th grade theology in the classroom was that the boys are very into it at that point. They're at that point where they're reading their own D&D books, right? And they're figuring out how to do that put stuff together. They like not just Legos, but they like the higher end kind of things. They like instruction manuals. They want to code, so their minds really turn on at a certain point there, where the little boy just wants to run with sticks.
So, right. So at a 7-year-old phase, you're more, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak kind of phase of life. And it'll even out as he gets closer to 10. But then 14, like what happens? If you don't catch him at 10, he's attracted to something else.
Yeah, kind of.
It's not serious. It wasn't serious enough at 10, so I'm going to go move on.
Well, yeah, think about, what I was saying about movies and Star Wars earlier, and how it was part of my life, right? It was a deep part of my life, so that whether I was exposed at age 5, those summers with just those 8 DVDs and watching, and Tron was one of them, watching Star Wars over and over again, it meant that when I was in high school, that was just what I liked. It's just who I was. And so if we wait until 14, it's too late to capture the imagination of the child. So the 10-year-old still has enough imagination as a child. The 14-year-old's a man now. And he can still be inspired, but you're right. He's already got the things he wants to be inspired with by the time he's 14. He's got to try those for a while before he's going to go looking for something else. Yeah, that's the real thing. But so much of that is parents, too. Right. I mean, Sunday school's not going to do it.
I think that's an interesting situation. Let me know if we need to wrap this up.
Well, let's respond, and how many more we got?
We have touched on most of them. I was just going to say, I find that an interesting situation because if you look at, now I don't know statistically how this goes, but if you look at the pews, it would seem that it's easier for a female to come back or to stay in the pews and harder for the men.
Yeah, I think that has to do with the feminization of the church, and this is why the 14-year-old boy who has only had Sunday school has effectively only had a soft version of Christianity, a child's version, and not I don't know how to say it without sounding like I'm sexist, a feminized version of Christianity. It is not rigorous. It is not demanding. It is not disciplined. It is, at best, some stories that you have to sit still for and a couple of weird, lame songs they make you dance to. And so that's all that the 14-year-old boy has had so far. And then this really dry, boring experience of going to church with his parents and having to sit there, but never being taught how the hymns work, never having the text of the hymns explained, any of that kind of stuff, right? You just kind of have to sit through this music you don't like. When they would come back, their memories dominate what they would come back to. And if they do come back and they find that it is mainly a place where there aren't other young men, that does not inspire them to come back in that way either. To be the only young man in the church is lonely. It makes you wonder. Not like intellectually wonder, but why would I be here? This isn't for me. And so I think that, and that's a bigger topic, the softening of Jesus. There was a book I read. It wasn't a very good book, but it was okay. The premise was very good. And it was written by I believe a minority immigrant Protestant. It said, "Your Jesus is too safe." That's what it was called. And it wasn't really, it was kind of a call to radicalism, but he was right about the way we put Jesus in a little box of nice Jesus, nice. And men will not follow merely a nice man. If being nice was what it took to lead, then we'd have very different leaders in the world. Yeah. And they follow a leader. They follow a man who's strong. And the texts of Jesus, you listen to Mark talk about the impact Jesus had on every room he walked into. I mean, he wasn't nice. He was honest, convicted. He was Thanos, right? He was convicted. You couldn't sway him. No, you try, but he's already been through it. He knows what he must do. And man of sorrows, right? Tear in his eye. Ah, Thanos, ridiculous. Anyway, but that's what I think is missing for those 14-year-old men. They have to see not Jesus the good shepherd with the pet sheep, but Jesus the shepherd fighting the wolf, and then know that this is not just for them, but that they're called to this in life.
Your interview with Peterson, you guys dove into a few of his side hobbies, I guess you could say, with comic books and so forth. And he mentioned his first comic book that he read was Spider-Man, and how formational his view of just the hero was in his life and in his theological view of the world as well. And I was curious, as a final question, I guess, what was the first comic book you read?
Yeah. When I fell in love with comics, which I'm not really in love with them anymore, although I appreciate them.
But you have such a wide
knowledge of them.
So, I mean, your Marvel, your love for Marvel, though it might not be you picking up the book and actually reading it, it's the comic, it's the lore of Marvel.
Yeah. So much of that I've gotten from the movies, though. And then I've gone and researched on Wikipedia when I want to know more about the characters, because I haven't really read those comics. There's two that I think of immediately kind of as highly impactful. I was about 12. And one was Spawn. His name was Spawn. Spawn number 1 through about 13, I think I read. And Spawn is this soldier who dies at war, but wants to have more time with his wife. And so he sells his soul to the devil to come back. But then when he really dies later, he now is owned by the devil, and he is turned, or maybe that's not quite how it works. He comes back. This is right. He comes back, but it's like the genie's trick. So he doesn't come back as himself. He comes back as, I mean, he is himself, but his body is just ruined and like burned. And he's got these magical powers that allow him to just do like almost high level diabolical destruction of things if he wants to. But he's a good man. And he doesn't really know what's going on at first. He's trying to figure out who he is, how he got here. And he's having these memories of him having this deal and having lost the woman and trying to find her. And then he finds himself confronted with other demons that he is destroying because they're bad. But then the angels don't like him either. And so he's got to fight them. And it's this real battle between light and darkness with the sinner within. It's amazing. He's an imperfect man trying to find the good, but not understanding what's happened. I don't know that story real well, so I may have mistold it, but it really did impact me. And when I think about my own desire to write or create heroes, Spawn is down in there somewhere. And the other one, same theme, is Star Wars, a series of 6 comics that came out, and it's from Dark Horse Comics. I cannot remember what it was called, but it was a sequel to Return of the Jedi. So like what happened 6 years later? And in an alternate reality that doesn't exist because I don't believe in a multiverse, but there should have been a multiverse in which there was a universe in which that was what they made the next movies out of, because it was so good. It was such a good story. In it, major premise, the Emperor is not really dead because he knows how to clone bodies and he can jump bodies with he's got enough force that when one body dies, he jumps to another clone body. So he's not really dead. He's still running the Empire. And Luke knows this. And so what Luke does is he does go to him and submits himself as a disciple to learn the dark side. But his goal is to be a double agent, to get underneath, to learn the ways of the dark side, get close enough to the Emperor that he can actually figure out how to really kill him. And so a lot of the storyline is Luke losing himself to the dark side, but trying not to, and trying to use the ring for good, as it were. And meanwhile, there's this big thing with I can't remember it now. The rest of the Alliance is having a big fight too, and it has a big culmination. But the dark hero, the struggling hero, the imperfect hero, the one who knows his own flaws. Yeah. I didn't think I picked that stuff up on purpose, but apparently it connects somehow.
Well, thank you for giving of your time today to this, for expressing how Star Wars has formed you, how it has let you down, how you still can look at it and see through a Christian worldview the good that it is, that it could have been, and sharing that with us is valuable. Thank you.
Yub nub. Was that worth $1? What about $5? If so, Meridith Fisk and her family would love to have it. Go to projectresurrection.blog or click the Patreon link in the show notes below if you think the laborer is worth her wages.